a profound question hovers over the annals of history, challenging the very narratives that have shaped civilizations for millennia. Beneath the enduring symbol of the cross, an ancient inquiry persists, more resilient than any royal edict or ecclesiastical pronouncement. The core of this enigma does not concern the death of Christ, an event universally acknowledged by both historical record and devout belief. Instead, it delves into the tantalizing possibility that his existence extended beyond the grave, perpetuated through a lineage, a family, a clandestine truth that could, even now, subtly influence the intricate tapestry of global affairs. The tumultuous era of late antiquity, a crucible of change and upheaval, proved to be exceptionally fertile soil for the germination of profound secrets. Mighty empires, once thought eternal, fractured and dissolved into dust. Legions of soldiers, bearing the emblems of eagles, lions, and crosses, traversed vast landscapes, their movements reshaping the known world. Within the ancient, labyrinthine streets of Jerusalem, the fragrant tendrils of incense ascended from hallowed temples, while the cacophony of goats echoed through bustling marketplaces. In the hushed sanctity of darkened chambers, under the flickering glow of candlelight, ancient scrolls seemed to murmur forgotten truths. It was within this crucible of sacred dust and prophetic whispers that the audacious notion of a concealed bloodline first took root, a concept as delicate as a newborn shoot, yet possessing an astonishing tenacity. Certain historians, adherents to stringent academic rigor, firmly contend that no verifiable evidence exists to suggest that Jesus of Nazareth ever fathered children. For these scholars, the inquiry is definitively resolved, akin to a securely bolted door for which no key can be found. Yet, another contingent, less constrained by the strictures of ancient parchment and more intrigued by the boundless expanse of possibility, gravitates towards persistent whispers surrounding the figure of Mary Magdalene. These proponents portray her not as a mere repentant sinner, but rather as an intimate companion, a trusted partner, and perhaps even a spouse. This fervent debate, predating the very establishment of vast libraries, continues unabated, buzzing with an enduring energy, much like a swarm of bees perpetually encircling a hidden yet potent hive. Among the myriad legends, one compelling narrative recounts Mary Magdalene's perilous flight across the vast expanse of the sea in the aftermath of the crucifixion. Her vessel, so the legend proclaims, drifted aimlessly, devoid of sail or oar, until an unseen divine hand guided it unerringly towards the sun-drenched shores of Gaul. There, she reportedly disembarked, bearing not the conventional relics of sacred wood or woven cloth, but a burden far more profound and, crucially, far more perilous to the nascent church. A womb heavy with a most extraordinary, indeed, a divine inheritance. This remains a deeply speculative account, undeniably so, yet it has embedded itself within the collective imagination of poets, theologically rebellious thinkers, and even contemporary historians, clinging with the tenacious grip of ivy upon the ancient, unyielding stones of a cathedral. The prevailing historical perspective largely dismisses these captivating narratives as mere fabrications, intricate fictions meticulously crafted centuries after the death of Christ, designed primarily to imbue an otherwise solitary and ascetic figure with a romanticized, earthly dimension. And yet, one must ponder, how frequently have the most enduring myths harbored profound kernels of undeniable truth? The fabled city of Troy, for instance, existed for centuries solely within the realm of epic poetry, until the relentless spades of archaeologists unearthed its golden remnants beneath the sun-baked soil of modern-day Turkey. Similarly, ancient kings once sought omens and prophecies in the industrious flight of bees, and while their interpretations were often symbolic, contemporary science now reveals the astonishing, intricate order within these creatures' lives. Truths our forebears intuitively sensed, but lacked the lexicon to articulate. Could it be that this particular narrative, too, awaits the moment its own deep-seated soil is finally turned, revealing a hidden reality? The established church, ever vigilant against the perceived dangers of unbridled imagination and heterodox thought, systematically endeavored to suppress such audacious speculations, burying them beneath layers of sacred ritual and ecclesiastical decree. Heresies, like resilient wildflowers, ceaselessly sprang forth from the fertile ground of human inquiry, and each time they were ruthlessly uprooted, consigned to flames, or meticulously overwritten by sanctioned doctrine. Yet, paradoxically, it is within the profound silences of history, in the lacunae where ancient ink has faded to illegibility or precious parchment has been irrevocably torn, that the most resonant and challenging questions continue to echo. Could the legendary Holy Grail itself, that elusive object so desperately sought by valiant knights and celebrated poets, have been conceived as something far less tangible than a cup of wood or a shimmering chalice of gold? Could it, in fact, have been a living vessel of flesh, a sacred family line flowing unbroken through the vast currents of time? In this initial, tantalizing whisper of the unfolding narrative, absolute certainty remains elusive. There are only fleeting hints, ephemeral shadows, and the profound, almost poetic irony that a humble carpenter's son, condemned and executed as a common criminal, might have inadvertently inaugurated not merely a global faith, but an enduring, clandestine dynasty. If such a lineage indeed existed, the compelling questions immediately arise: what became of it? Did it dissipate into the ether like the fleeting mists of morning? Or did it, with cunning resilience, intricately weave itself into the very fabric of Europe's royal thrones? And if so, would such a sacred trust not necessitate the unwavering protection of guardians, individuals formidable enough to withstand the relentless onslaught of inquisitions, the fervor of crusades, and the capricious will of kings across the centuries? And so, into this profound enigma step the Knights Templar. While their documented history commences at a significantly later juncture, these enigmatic warriors would, according to some accounts, ultimately assume the mantle of custodians for this astonishing possibility. Their iconic white mantles, far from being solely a symbol of spiritual purity, might have simultaneously cloaked a profound and dangerous secrecy. Yet, before their dramatic entrance onto the grand stage of history, the narrative momentarily lingers at the foot of the cross, attentive to the faint echoes reverberating in the profound silence that follows a tempest. The world holds its breath, waiting to discern if the momentous question lingering beneath that ancient symbol will ever yield its answer. For this fleeting moment, the sole incontrovertible truth is the pervasive presence of uncertainty itself. The only illumination comes from a solitary, flickering candle within a shadowed crypt, while the faint, persistent hum of bees drifts from an unseen distance, as if these tiny, golden-backed creatures are themselves ferrying ancient secrets. And with that subtle, resonant hum, the deeper tale truly commences. In the decades immediately following the tumultuous conclusion of the First Crusade, the ancient, hallowed thoroughfares of Jerusalem found themselves thronged, indeed almost choked, with a ceaseless tide of devoted pilgrims. Men and women journeyed from myriad distant lands, their hands clutching worn rosaries, their lips murmuring fervent prayers as they navigated cautiously past a cacophony of vendors hawking figs, sacred icons, and, on particularly fortuitous days, an assortment of highly dubious relics. To traverse those perilous roads was to immerse oneself in a vibrant yet precarious tapestry woven from threads of profound faith and imminent danger. Ruthless bandits lay in wait among the rugged hills. Elusive Saracen raiders frequently struck unsuspecting caravans, and the insidious whispers of betrayal seemed to cling to every shadowed ancient stone corridor. It was precisely into this crucible of fervent devotion and pervasive peril that a small, unassuming band of 9 poor knights courageously stepped forward. They pledged their formidable swords and their very lives not to the temporal authority of kings or feudal lords, but to the supreme will of God Himself. They adopted the solemn, indeed rather cumbersome, appellation of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a name that could rival the length of many a medieval sermon. Most common folk, with characteristic practicality, simply referred to them as the Knights of the Temple, or more succinctly, the Templars. Their genesis was remarkably humble, almost starkly austere. These dedicated knights solemnly swore sacred vows of poverty, chastity, and unwavering obedience, a commitment that undoubtedly astonished many of their martial contemporaries, who typically favored the earthly comforts of fine wine, the companionship of women, and the luxurious warmth of wool-lined boots. Yet, a profound irony walked hand in hand with their austere beginnings, for these initially impoverished knights were destined, in a remarkably short span, to amass a fortune that would eclipse the wealth of kings. The official narrative, presented in its most unblemished form, posits that these valiant men initially dedicated themselves to the noble and perilous task of safeguarding pilgrims upon their arduous journeys to the Holy Land. This undeniably commendable mission bestowed upon them immense moral authority and quickly garnered the crucial favor of the papacy. However, a growing chorus of historians contends that their formative years were shrouded in far more profound mystery than the simple execution of patrol duties. A compelling question arises: why, for instance, were they specifically quartered directly within the venerable yet crumbling ruins of Solomon's Temple? Furthermore, why did they seemingly vanish from the historical record for nearly a full decade, with remarkably scant documentation of their activities, as if the world had, with polite indifference, simply forgotten their existence? Was this merely a consequence of lost medieval paperwork, or were they, with methodical secrecy, diligently searching for something of immeasurable significance, patiently buried beneath those ancient, hallowed stones? Here, speculation flows with the mercurial swiftness of quicksilver, presenting a cascade of intriguing possibilities. Some fervent theorists assert that the Templars unearthed priceless relics during their clandestine activities, perhaps even fragments of the true cross, or more astonishingly, the fabled Ark of the Covenant itself, a discovery that, if veracious, would undoubtedly have orchestrated the most logistically challenging and utterly awkward moving day in the entire annals of Christian history. Others maintain that their diligent hands brought to light ancient scrolls, meticulously detailed genealogies, or explosive documents that fundamentally contradicted the officially sanctioned narrative of Christ's life. The mainstream historical consensus, however, staunchly dismisses these theories as nothing more than fanciful embroidery, an imaginative embellishment designed to inject color into an otherwise straightforward account of devout knights and their prayers. Yet, this intricate embroidery stubbornly persists, woven into the rich tapestry of folklore with an almost unbreakable thread. Intriguingly, the knights themselves appeared to subtly cultivate this air of mystery. They adopted a distinctive seal depicting two men sharing a single horse, a potent symbol simultaneously conveying their initial vows of poverty and their profound sense of partnership. It was, in essence, a visual jest cast in metal, humorous and even self-deprecating, yet perhaps also a cryptic riddle. Were they merely illustrating their unity, or were they, with calculated subtlety, hinting at a hidden dual mission of immense import? As one astute chronicler drolly observed, these knights possessed fewer horses than they harbored profound mysteries. As their renown soared across Christendom, pilgrims bestowed their fervent blessings upon the Templars. Powerful nobles eagerly supplied them with vital funding, and even the most formidable kings began to take notice of their burgeoning influence. These austere men, clad in their distinctive white mantles emblazoned with crimson crosses, transcended the role of mere protectors. They rapidly evolved into potent symbols. Their very presence on the chaotic stage of the medieval world evoked a profound sense of order amidst rampant disarray, a divine certainty in an era plagued by pervasive doubt. Yet even as their public stature grew, the persistent whispers beneath the hallowed ground of Solomon's temple continued to resonate, buzzing with an unsettling energy, like a hidden colony of bees within a hive that remains tantalizingly out of sight. The fundamental questions lingered, unspoken but potent. What exactly had they so diligently sought? And what profound, potentially world-altering secret had they ultimately unearthed? Historians remain sharply divided on this pivotal matter, engaging in fervent academic dispute. One school of thought contends that the Templars' meteoric success was purely a testament to their exceptional organizational prowess, establishing a meticulously managed military monastic order that flourished simply because the tumultuous world of the Crusades desperately required their unique services. Conversely, other scholars vehemently insist that their astonishingly rapid ascent to power strongly suggests the existence of something far more profound, some clandestine leverage, perhaps an extraordinary knowledge or discovery that afforded them unprecedented favor within the highest echelons of papal authority. Indeed, it begs the question, what other group of initially impoverished knights could possibly have received official sanction directly from the Pope himself after such a remarkably brief period of service? As the golden light of evening gracefully descended upon the ancient hills of Jerusalem, pilgrims reverently lit candles and offered their fervent prayers in makeshift chapels, while the Templars themselves knelt in profound silence within the austere confines of their stone quarters. The evocative scents of olive oil and ancient dust mingled in the still air. In the mesmerizing flicker of lamplight against rough-hewn stone, their iconic white mantles seemed to gleam with an almost ethereal luminescence, like spectral wings poised for flight. Whether their fervent prayers were solely for the divine protection of weary travelers, or if they secretly encompassed the sacred guardianship of an extraordinary secret unearthed in the profound silence of ancient ruins, remains an enduring and fiercely contested debate. From this pivotal dawn, however, their unfolding narrative would only intensify in brilliance rather than dimming, tracing a trajectory as inexorable and radiant as the sun's majestic path across the azure sky. From their humble beginnings as impoverished knights mounted on borrowed horses, they were destined to transform into the most formidable and influential power across the entirety of Europe. Yet, it is within these nascent moments, amidst the ancient dust of the temple, that one discerns both their profound humility and an impenetrable veil of mystery. The faint, persistent stirring of unseen bees, the tantalizing presence of scrolls hidden deep within the shadows, and the very first, subtle stirrings of a legacy so potent that even mighty kings would, in time, come to genuinely fear it. Far beneath the bustling, sun-drenched streets of Jerusalem, an almost palpable silence pressed relentlessly against the worn, ancient stones. The venerable ruins of Solomon's Temple, a place steeped in millennia of history and sanctity, served as no ordinary dwelling for a nascent band of impoverished knights. While devout pilgrims might have found it profoundly poetic that the intrepid warriors of Christ should reside precisely where the kings of Israel once offered their solemn prayers, persistent whispers circulating throughout the city suggested a far more profound and clandestine reason for their unusual choice of domicile. Why, indeed, would they deliberately select crumbling ruins when more comfortable and readily available quarters stood elsewhere? Why would they choose to linger so persistently in the subterranean depths unless the very ground beneath their feet held secrets of immeasurable, perhaps dangerous significance? Indeed, certain ancient chroniclers, in their often cryptic accounts, record that the Templars dedicated their formative years not to the conventional patrolling of treacherous roads, but rather to an intense and sustained campaign of excavation. The rhythmic clang of picks and the persistent scrape of shovels would have echoed faintly, yet undeniably, through the very earth beneath the sacred Temple Mount, even as, high above, the fragrant tendrils of prayers ascended on plumes of incense smoke. The compelling question remains: what were these enigmatic knights so diligently seeking in the profound darkness of the earth? Was it merely a cache of forgotten gold, a trove of sacred relics, or perhaps ancient scrolls? Or could it have been something far more extraordinary and conceptually challenging? Maps inscribed not with conventional ink, but intricately encoded within the very arrangement of the ancient stones themselves. On this particularly contentious point, the scholarly community remains fiercely at odds. Traditional historians, grounding their arguments in verifiable evidence, maintain that no conclusive proof exists to substantiate claims of such extensive excavations. They propose that the knights were, more plausibly, preoccupied with the vital tasks of organizing robust defenses and firmly establishing the foundational structure of their nascent order. However, a vibrant array of fringe theories adamantly insists that the Templars did indeed uncover relics of immense and potentially world-shattering significance. Long-lost scrolls, meticulously detailed genealogies, or even a coded map designed to lead far beyond the familiar confines of Jerusalem. One particularly audacious tale speaks of blood maps, ancient documents purportedly delineating the lineage of Christ's supposed descendants, linking them to distant lands across the vast, tumultuous seas, awaiting the day they could be safely revealed to a world finally prepared to receive such a truth. Another persistent whisper suggests they miraculously discovered the legendary Ark of the Covenant, though discerning skeptics are quick to quip that successfully moving such an iconic golden chest through the labyrinthine customs and checkpoints of the medieval era would have constituted a logistical miracle of truly biblical proportions in itself. Yet, despite all counter-arguments, the persistent whispers retained their potency. The very terrain itself, the revered Temple Mount, was steeped in a profound tapestry of ancient associations. Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike held this sacred plateau in deep veneration, each faith meticulously layering centuries of spiritual significance into its venerable stones. To undertake any excavation, there was not merely a matter of archaeological curiosity or academic pursuit. It was an act fraught with the potential to fundamentally reorder the foundational narratives of faith itself. The notion that a small cadre of 9 knights might unearth profound truths, revelations potent enough to disquiet pontiffs and destabilize monarchies, admittedly possesses a dramatic, perhaps even hyperbolic quality. However, does not the unfolding of history frequently prove itself far more extraordinary than its officially sanctioned renditions? One can almost vividly conjure the airborne dust motes rising in the subterranean passages, the oil lamps hissing softly as their wicks burned low, casting elongated, dancing shadows against the rough-hewn, ancient walls. The knights, outwardly resplendent in their martial panoply above ground, but inwardly cloaked in an impenetrable veil of secrecy below, maintained an absolute silence. Whatever they potentially discovered, if indeed their explorations yielded any tangible findings, was guarded with an unyielding ferocity. When later pressed about their formative years, their responses offered little beyond anodyne, pious pronouncements, the medieval equivalent of highly classified state information. The profound irony, of course, lay in the fact that their very reticence generated a far more clamorous public discourse. The less explicit information they divulged, the more vigorously others engaged in conjecture and speculation. Pilgrims, traversing the ancient routes, whispered that these knights served as guardians not solely of travelers, but of profound verities purportedly concealed since the illustrious reign of King Solomon. Some theorists posited that they had uncovered sacred geometries, a system of intricate lines and precise measures that, centuries later, would mysteriously resurface in the awe-inspiring designs of Gothic cathedrals across the European continent. Others, with a jocular yet half-serious tone, quipped that the knights had stumbled upon the original architectural manual, an explanation for the sudden, almost miraculous proliferation of monumental stone cathedrals, seemingly sprouting like an enchanted forest of masonry. Amidst this burgeoning tapestry of speculation, a subtle, yet poignant, irony emerged. Had the knights simply issued a frank declaration, we found nothing of remarkable significance. History might well have accepted their statement. Instead, their deliberate and profound secrecy served as a powerful magnet, drawing intense public scrutiny, and that very attention became the fertile soil in which towering myths took root and flourished. Much like bees toiling unseen within hidden combs, their unseen labor eventually reveals itself through the sweetness of its honey. And so the Templars emerged from their decade of enigmatic silence, not merely as formidable warriors, but as men undeniably touched by an aura of profound mystery. They garnered official endorsement from the Church, received fervent praise from the faithful, and were assiduously courted by powerful kings. The metaphorical dust of their supposed subterranean explorations clung invisibly to their flowing mantles, the indelible scent of guarded secrets trailing them wherever their horses carried them. Whether they bore ancient maps, sacred relics, or merely potent rumors, they re-entered the European stage as more than mere soldiers. They were perceived as custodians of an unspoken, profound possibility. If ancient bloodlines truly persisted from the cross, if scrolls existed to substantiate or guide them, then those vital maps were not merely inscribed in ink, but etched in the very dust and vital fluid of history, hidden deep within the temple's bowels until 9 dedicated knights bore them forth into the very heart of Christendom. By the early 13th century, monarchs across the European continent began to make a discovery that was simultaneously comforting and deeply humiliating. The Templars had become demonstrably superior financiers than their crowned counterparts. Crowned rulers, who once paraded in resplendent gold-threaded cloaks, now found themselves, with quiet deference, bowing before men in simple white mantles, whose presence carried the subtle blended aroma of beeswax and tanned horse leather. For while these individual knights had embraced solemn vows of personal poverty, the collective coffers of the order burgeoned, overflowing with wealth like harvest barns at the peak of the season. The Templars had perfected an intricate financial system that, in contemporary terms, would be recognized as an early form of international finance. A pilgrim, for instance, could deposit a cache of coins in a Parisian branch, receive a cryptically coded slip of parchment, and then safely redeem the equivalent sum in Jerusalem. This innovative system obviated the need to risk traversing the long, perilous roads with valuable currency, where brigands lay in wait in every subsequent valley. It was an elegant, remarkably efficient, and, to the increasingly indebted kings, an irritatingly indispensable service. Monarchs who had long relied on the burdensome taxation of their peasantry to fill their treasuries suddenly found themselves dependent on Templar notes to underwrite their costly wars and construct their formidable castles. Mainstream historians typically interpret this rapid financial ascendancy as the natural outgrowth of widespread trust. The Templars possessed both formidable martial strength and an undeniable divine legitimacy, thus instilling confidence that their patrons' money would be secure within their keeping. However, more heterodox or fringe theories suggest that the knights' wealth grew with such astonishing rapidity because they possessed something far more significant, perhaps sacred relics that compelled lavish donations from fearful nobles, or perhaps esoteric knowledge of lucrative trade routes gleaned from ancient maps discovered during their time in Jerusalem. Some even whisper of alchemical secrets, hinting at the ability to transmute base metals, though skeptics dryly quip that if they had truly mastered such an art, the necessity of charging interest on their loans would have been entirely superfluous. Kings, by their very nature, harbor a profound aversion to indebtedness. They much preferred their subjects to owe them rather than the reverse. Yet, by the close of the 13th century, monarchs from the distant shores of England to the Iberian realm of Aragon found themselves burdened with astronomical debts to the Templars, sums so vast they were practically unrepayable. One can vividly imagine the quiet, gnawing humiliation, a crowned sovereign, God's anointed representative on earth, shuffling into a Templar preceptory to conduct solitary, hushed negotiations with a group of monks clad in armor. One pictures the knights, perhaps with polite, knowing smiles, offering the necessary parchment, while outside, the gentle, unceasing hum of bees in the chapel garden seemed to provide a mocking counterpoint, as if amused by this dramatic reversal of traditional power dynamics. Some historical scholars contend that the Templars never harbored any direct intention of challenging royal authority. They merely provided a crucial and effective service. Others argue that their burgeoning financial clout was, in itself, an inherent provocation. After all, wealth is inextricably linked to power, and power, however subtly wielded, inevitably attracts the corrosive force of envy. The profound question continues to linger. Did the Templars accumulate such immense riches simply as exceptionally adept bankers? Or were they financing something far larger and more clandestine? The guardianship of a sacred bloodline, the protection of exiled heirs, or even the meticulous preparation for a destiny that Europe was not yet prepared to witness. Jokes concerning their immense riches circulated widely even during their own epoch. Troubadours, in their satirical verses, sang that the knight's vow of poverty was so stringent they could only afford spurs plated with gold, rather than ones crafted from solid gold. Others suggested, with a sharper edge, that kings bowed more deeply and reverently to the temple's overflowing treasury than to the sacred altar of God. Yet beneath the veneer of satire, a profound unease simmered. Everyone suspected that the knights held not merely vast quantities of coin, but significant leverage. And here lies one of the profound paradoxes of history. The Templars commenced their journey as poor knights sworn to an ideal of humility, yet in their mission to lift pilgrims from the dangers of the road, they inadvertently lifted themselves into positions akin to thrones of immense influence. A chalice of power was pressed into their hands, and whether by conscious desire or unavoidable circumstance, they drank deeply from it. Their meteoric rise rendered them simultaneously indispensable to reigning monarchs, and paradoxically, dangerous to those very same kings who were signing their financial receipts. As the sun began its descent over Europe's formidable castles, torches flared against the cold, unyielding stone, illuminating monarchs as they meticulously tallied their accumulating debts by candlelight. Somewhere in the hushed quiet, perhaps in a chapel where bees continued their unseen work in wooden hives, Templars whispered prayers not only for the salvation of souls, but perhaps also for the continued safeguarding of profound secrets. For it was no small irony that those who owed them the most would soon meticulously plot their ultimate destruction. From their humble beginnings as 9 impoverished knights, the order expanded with the relentless, tenacious growth of ivy clinging to ancient stone, initially subtly, then with an astonishing velocity. Europe, a continent weary of endemic banditry and eagerly seeking symbols of divine certainty, welcomed them with open arms. By the 12th century, their distinctive white mantles adorned with crimson crosses were a ubiquitous sight, riding through kingdoms, and the world seemed to defer to their burgeoning authority. Their vigilant presence along the perilous pilgrim routes was no longer a mere curiosity. It had become an assurance itself, as if a benevolent deity had strategically stationed his chosen soldiers along the dusty, treacherous pathways. Mainstream historians will typically attribute this meteoric rise to a combination of superior organization and opportune timing. The Knights offered crucial protection in an era when pilgrims carried not only their prayer books, but also purses bulging with valuable coin. Secure and reliable travel, in turn, stimulated increased commerce. Increased commerce, naturally, equated to content and prosperous kings. Yet, alongside this pragmatic explanation, another persistent theory lingers: the idea that they possessed secret knowledge unearthed in Jerusalem, which endowed them with leverage far greater than their numerical strength alone could account for. Consider, for instance, their extraordinary papal privileges. In the year 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a papal bull that granted the Templars a sweeping exemption from local taxes and the unprecedented authority to answer solely to Rome. They were, in essence, rendered untouchable by local lords and bishops alike. Some scholars argue that this was a shrewd political maneuver, with the Pope strategically needing powerful allies during volatile and uncertain times. Others, more inclined to speculation, wonder if the Pope himself was bound by profound secrets delivered in hushed confidence, scrolls so dangerous they possessed the power to unseat established thrones. The public image of the Templar became a complex blend of awe-inspiring reverence and a subtle undercurrent of terror. Clad in their distinctive white mantles, a potent symbol of purity, they strode into battle with the precise, disciplined efficiency of monastic orders. Their crimson crosses gleamed starkly, like drops of fresh blood against a snowy backdrop. To the common villagers, they were perceived as holy avengers, divinely sanctioned. To rival knights, they were unnervingly efficient and formidable. Chroniclers of the era frequently record instances where a mere handful of Templars could scatter entire enemy forces, though skeptics dryly suggest that medieval chroniclers were rarely inclined to allow mere facts to detract from a compelling narrative. Their distinctive seal, depicting two men sharing a single horse, once viewed with a degree of humor, evolved into a complex riddle that others could not quite unravel. Was it merely a literal representation of their initial vow of poverty? Or was it a more profound reminder that the order itself lived a double existence, one publicly visible and the other shrouded in impenetrable secrecy? In the boisterous laughter of taverns, some joked that the knights were simply inept at managing their horse budgets. Yet the persistent whispers beneath the surface humor always lingered. These men guarded something far more significant than mere coin and sword. Their pervasive influence extended into the realms of finance, architecture, and politics. They established a groundbreaking banking system that permitted nobles to deposit their wealth in one urban center and conveniently withdraw it in another. A modern convenience that contemporary travelers would recognize with a wry smile as the medieval equivalent of an ATM. Pilgrims marveled at the unprecedented safety this system offered. Kings, however, grumbled at their growing financial dependence. Like industrious bees meticulously constructing a hive, the Templars built an intricate network whose persistent hum resonated across the entire European continent. But amidst their spectacular rise, underlying disputes and profound questions continued to simmer. Were the knights truly pious protectors of the faithful, or were they wielders of a more clandestine, hidden power? Some clerics muttered darkly that their extraordinary independence bordered on outright arrogance. Others perceived in their imposing stone commanderies symbols carved with strange, esoteric geometries, as though these formidable structures were less conventional ecclesiastical buildings and more like coded sacred texts rendered in stone. Even today, scholars continue to debate whether the sudden, soaring leap in Gothic architecture owed its dramatic advancements to inspiration derived from the East, or to ancient knowledge purportedly whispered from the tunnels beneath Solomon's temple itself. Envision the European continent at the close of day, as cathedral bells resonated through the fading light and hearth fires cast their flickering glow upon weary, dust-laden travelers. Into this evocative tableau, the Knights Templar made their entrance, their distinctive white mantles gleaming under the final caress of the setting sun, their arrival simultaneously reassuring and disquieting. While they undeniably bore formidable swords, it is conjectured that they might also have concealed delicate scrolls beneath their protective chainmail, harboring insights that transcended the typical purview of a conventional warrior. Consequently, the emergence of these white mantles represented far more than a simple chronicle of valor or economic enterprise. It was, rather, an intricate narrative woven with potent symbols, the stark blood-red crosses emblazoned on their attire, the enigmatic bees meticulously carved into the very fabric of their sacred chapels, and the chalices intricately etched into architectural archways. Each of these emblematic motifs hinted strongly at an underlying, hidden order that operated beneath the surface of their overt activities. The general populace perceived them as formidable knights, yet a deeper intuition suggested they might also be the vigilant custodians of a profound, undisclosed mystery. Across the span of many centuries, marked by relentless crusades and devout supplications, the Knights Templar reportedly safeguarded a potent emblem, one whose true nature few individuals ventured to articulate openly: the legendary Grail. For the ordinary populace, this revered object manifested as a tangible chalice, believed to be the precise vessel from which Christ himself had partaken during the solemn Last Supper, touched by his divine lips and consecrated by the holy wine it once contained. To the imaginative minds of poets and troubadours, it represented an elusive object of perpetual yearning, forever glimpsed on the horizon of dreams, but perpetually just beyond reach. Nevertheless, within the hushed sanctity of the Templar cloisters, hushed murmurs suggested a radically different interpretation, that the Grail, in its profound essence, was never truly a mere physical cup. The prevailing, conventional understanding of the Grail remains quite unambiguous. Medieval chivalric orders harbored a profound reverence for sacred relics, and what artifact could possibly surpass the spiritual significance of the very vessel employed by Christ? Given that devout pilgrims frequently shed tears of profound emotion upon encountering mere fragments of the true cross, it was entirely logical that a chalice from the Last Supper would naturally become an unparalleled object of fervent veneration. However, proponents of more unconventional, fringe theories embrace a more audacious proposition, that the Grail was not a material artifact fashioned from stone or precious gold, but rather an intrinsic lineage, not an item to be actively discovered, but a living entity or group to be diligently safeguarded. According to this compelling narrative, the Grail manifested as a sacred bloodline, subtly circulating through the intricate dynastic tapestry of Europe, vigilantly protected with the same meticulous care afforded to the precious coinage secured within the Templars' formidable vaults. It is at this pivotal juncture that the enigmatic figure of Mary Magdalene re-enters the historical narrative. Certain compelling accounts posit that she departed Jerusalem, not merely as a solitary refugee, but accompanied by a child, bearing the veritable vessel of Christ's sacred blood, not within her physical grasp, but cradled within her womb. If this extraordinary proposition holds true, then the Grail ceases to be an inanimate artifact and transforms into a living family, intricately interwoven into the established dynasties of France, receiving discreet and unwavering protection from the white-mantled Knights Templar. Academic scholars, however, vehemently contest this assertion, with some dismissing it as mere poetic embellishment stretched to the point of conspiratorial paranoia. Nevertheless, one cannot disregard the remarkable tenacity with which this legend persists, embedding itself deeply within the ancient stones of Provence, a region where numerous chapels venerate Magdalene not as a repentant sinner, but as an esteemed and revered matriarch. Within the fortified Templar commanderies, an abundance of symbolic imagery was conspicuously present: intricately carved chalices adorning stone surfaces, delicate roses etched into the very walls of their chapels, and the pervasive motif of bees diligently buzzing amidst carved vines. The critical question arises: were these merely conventional, pious embellishments, or did they serve as subtle allusions to a more profound, concealed obligation? Some historical scholars contend that the magnificent Gothic cathedrals themselves were conceived as architectural embodiments of the Grail legend, functioning as colossal stone vessels meticulously designed to contain and channel divine illumination. Conversely, other academics dismiss such interpretations with a degree of skepticism, wryly noting that if every pointed arch and intricate detail were indeed a cryptic riddle, then the medieval master masons must have possessed an exceptionally mischievous and playful disposition. In this complex and enduring debate, profound ironies unfold with the beauty and unexpectedness of blooming roses. Firstly, the Knights Templar, bound by solemn vows of chastity, may paradoxically have dedicated their formidable swords to safeguarding the most deeply intimate of all possible legacies, a concealed and sacred family. Secondly, while the established church enthusiastically lauded the Grail as an unequivocally holy cup, it might simultaneously have harbored a profound apprehension regarding the possibility that it represented instead a fertile womb, an interpretation that gravely imperiled official theological doctrine. And thirdly, the wandering troubadours, whose lyrical ballads extolled the Grail as a purely mystical and ethereal object, may have inadvertently approached a deeper reality than they ever consciously realized, their evocative songs resonating with truths that were otherwise only murmured in the hushed confines of ancient stone corridors. The mental imagery evoked by these theories is undeniably captivating. One envisions knights traversing moonlit landscapes, not merely protecting material wealth, but diligently escorting living heirs through the dense, shadowed forests, their white mantles appearing spectral and ethereal against the dark silhouettes of the trees. One can almost feel the biting cold air, hear the crisp crunch of hooves upon frosted leaves, and discern the hushed, fervent prayers of these dedicated guardians whose ultimate mission was not to achieve conquest, but to meticulously conceal. The Grail, within this profound interpretation, emerges less as a coveted treasure, to be aggressively sought and won, and more as a delicate secret, to be meticulously guarded, possessing a fragility and preciousness akin to honey, carefully sealed within its protective waxen comb. Naturally, not all observers subscribe to these speculative notions. A significant number of historians dismiss such imaginative conjectures as mere flights of fancy, steadfastly maintaining that the Templars were primarily pragmatic individuals, adept in both military strategy and financial management, rather than clandestine conspirators entangled in arcane dynastic mysteries. Nevertheless, even these skeptical scholars concede a compelling point: that the legend of the Grail attained its most vivid and widespread prominence precisely during the zenith of Templar power and influence. This undeniable temporal correlation prompts crucial inquiries. Why did this surge of interest occur at that specific moment? And why in those particular regions? Was it merely an extraordinary coincidence? Or did subtle whispers of profound secrets subtly emanate from their sacred chapels, eventually permeating the lyrical narratives of itinerant bards? Consequently, the Grail transcended its initial perception as a mere religious relic. It transformed into a multifaceted mirror, reflecting diverse truths to those who gazed upon it. For some, its shimmering surface reflected profound spiritual faith. For others, it revealed the intoxicating allure of temporal power. For the Knights Templar themselves, it is conceivable that it mirrored a solemn duty to vigilantly safeguard a clandestine chalice, not one fashioned from inert stone, but one composed of living blood. And so, this enigmatic, shadowed chalice continues to glimmer in the collective imagination, an elusive presence half perceived and half intuitively sensed, a profound riddle not confined to ancient goblets, but intricately poured into the very fabric of successive human generations. If Jerusalem is regarded as the primordial cradle of the Templars' profound mystery, then the sun-kissed region of Provence emerged as its resonant echo. Along the radiant coastline of southern France, expansive lavender fields undulate rhythmically, resembling vast, shimmering purple seas. Concurrently, within the serene stone chapels nestled in ancient villages, bees emit a gentle hum, as if burdened with untold secrets carried upon their delicate wings. For countless centuries, indigenous tradition has steadfastly asserted that Mary Magdalene, following her urgent flight from the Holy Land, arrived precisely here. Her modest vessel having drifted across the expansive Mediterranean Sea until a guiding providence ultimately delivered her to these auspicious shores. The conventional historical perspective typically interprets this narrative as a devoutly pious legend, a deliberate medieval endeavor to firmly embed sacred history within the fertile French landscape. Yet, amidst the ancient hills and labyrinthine caves of Provence, generations of pilgrims have consistently exchanged hushed whispers, portraying Magdalene not as a figure of repentant sin, but as an esteemed and revered matriarch. Numerous chapels throughout the region are consecrated in her honor, their interior walls frequently adorned with depictions of roses, and their altars occasionally bearing enigmatic symbols that subsequent generations would come to unequivocally associate with the secretive Knights Templar. Unconventional, fringe theories extend this narrative even further. They propose that Mary Magdalene did not arrive in isolation, but rather in the company of companions, and quite possibly with children. Within this compelling interpretation, the expansive lavender fields of ancient Gaul are transformed into the clandestine sanctuary of a sacred bloodline. Indigenous folklore recounts the presence of a woman imparting profound wisdom in utmost secrecy, her voice resonating softly within the cool confines of limestone grottos, with bees reportedly clustering in the surrounding shadows, as if inexplicably drawn to her profound presence. The Knights Templar, emerging centuries later in neighboring territories, are then argued by some to have served not as mere protectors of a static relic, but as the vigilant guardians of a living lineage whose roots were firmly established in this very region. Academic historians frequently challenge the inherent plausibility of these extensive claims. A considerable number of scholars adamantly assert that these traditions only fully flourished during the Middle Ages, meticulously shaped by itinerant monks intent on imbuing local landscapes with sacred significance. Conversely, other researchers argue that the sheer, unwavering persistence of the narrative, recounted with such profound conviction over many centuries, strongly implies a deeper, more substantive origin. Indeed, folk memory often serves as a resilient repository, safeguarding truths that formal parchment records might deliberately omit or inadvertently fail to capture. While one might rationally choose to dismiss the specific tale of Magdalene in Provence as apocryphal, it is impossible to deny the profound spiritual devotion it has inspired, or the enigmatic presence of the bees that consistently appear to hover at the very periphery of her enduring legend. Indeed, the humble bee evolved into a remarkably intriguing symbol within these storied lands. Across both Christian theology and ancient pagan folklore, these industrious insects were widely understood to embody concepts such as resurrection, communal harmony, and the cyclical nature of eternal return. Monastic communities, often maintaining their own apiaries, frequently referred to bees as little winged monks themselves, perpetually toiling to produce a vital sweetness that nourished and sustained others. Within the intricate narrative surrounding Mary Magdalene, bees came to symbolize continuity, representing the persistent, murmuring vitality of a concealed truth. It is therefore more than mere happenstance that, many centuries later, the official seals and intricate stone carvings of the Knights Templar would subtly, yet unmistakably, mirror this very same symbolic imagery. The underlying irony in this historical intersection is both subtle and profoundly impactful. Here stands a woman whose historical legacy is predominantly defined by silence and enforced exile, yet her conjectured arrival in Provence paradoxically infused the entire region with vibrant song, exquisite art, and fervent devotion. Here too are the bees, diminutive and seemingly fragile creatures, yet they have demonstrably outlived countless kings and formidable kingdoms, carrying their distinctive, secretive hum through the passage of millennia. And finally, here were knights solemnly sworn to a life of poverty, who nonetheless established chapels adorned not only with the ubiquitous symbols of crosses, but also with intricate carvings of roses and bees etched into the very stone, as if deliberately interweaving Magdalene's profound memory into the very fabric of their own sacred narrative tapestry. Envision a serene twilight descending upon Provence, the atmosphere imbued with the warm, intoxicating fragrance of lavender, the distant horizon painted a luminous gold, and the gentle, melancholic tolling of a chapel bell drifting softly across the expansive fields. Within the chapel's hallowed interior, candles cast a dancing, ethereal flicker against ancient, painted walls. Outside, bees meander languidly amidst the profusion of blossoms. Pilgrims reverently kneel, their lips moving in hushed prayers to a saint whose historical significance, they believe, may have far surpassed what the established church ever officially sanctioned. Somewhere in the fading light, a solitary Templar knight passes by on horseback, his white mantle gently brushing against the fragrant stalks of lavender, the omnipresent hum of bees resonating in the evening air like a solemn, unspoken vow. According to the enduring lore of Provence, the true Grail was never concealed within a cold, stone vault, but rather manifested as a sacred bloodline that literally walked among humanity. It existed within children discreetly raised in profound secrecy, in a legacy that persisted quietly, yet with unwavering tenacity, much like bees steadfastly refusing to abandon their cherished hive. Whether this constitutes historical truth or merely an enchanting tale, the region continues to resonate with its subtle presence, an unwavering undercurrent of memory that no official decree could ever truly suppress. As the formidable order of the Knights Templar progressively extended its influence across the European continent, their burgeoning wealth and an aura of profound secrecy invariably attracted both widespread admiration and persistent suspicion. Monarchs frequently depended upon the contents of their extensive coffers for financial support. Common peasants fervently sought and prayed for their protective shield, and even pontiffs bestowed their sacred blessings upon the Templars' battle standards. Nevertheless, envy invariably emerges as the dark shadow inexorably cast by immense power, and consequently, within the hushed and often dim halls of rival lords and ambitious bishops, insidious plots began to coalesce and stir, much like tendrils of smoke preceding an impending conflagration. The mainstream historical documentation on this period is unequivocally explicit. The grave accusations of heresy leveled against the Knights Templar originated not from the general populace, but rather from the machinations of ambitious secular rulers and powerful clerics who coveted the order's vast landholdings and immense treasuries. King Philip IV of France, famously known as Philip the Fair, a moniker that alluded more to his pallid complexion than to any inherent leniency in his disposition, was particularly zealous in his determination to dismantle their formidable influence. For him, the Templars' pronounced independence was utterly intolerable, and their immense wealth proved an irresistible temptation. Nevertheless, alternative fringe interpretations posit a significantly more sinister underlying motive. If these formidable knights genuinely bore documents or possessed esoteric knowledge originating from Jerusalem, such as ancient maps, intricate genealogies, or even tangible proof of Christ's concealed bloodline, then their ultimate annihilation may not have been principally concerned with their immense gold reserves, but rather with the imperative to enforce absolute silence. What could possibly constitute a more perilous threat to both the established church and the reigning monarchy than the revolutionary suggestion that divine authority flowed not exclusively from celestial realms, but precisely through a living, terrestrial family lineage? A mere relic could be conveniently disregarded as an object of popular superstition. However, the irrefutable existence of a sacred bloodline possessed the inherent power to utterly topple both altars and thrones. Conjecture propagated with alarming velocity. The Knights Templar faced grave accusations of sacrilege, including the abhorrent act of spitting upon the cross, the clandestine veneration of a mysterious, perhaps forbidden, effigy, and participation in unholy, prescribed rituals. A segment of historians posits that these damaging charges were devised purely from fanciful speculation, a product of medieval polemics infused with a macabre and twisted inventiveness. Conversely, other scholars observe with a knowing, cynical smile that the sheer outlandishness of a charge often seemed to amplify its credibility in the minds of apprehensive sovereigns. For the swift obliteration of a competitor, no method proved more efficacious than the damning pronouncement of heresy. Thus, the valiant knights who had formerly commanded profound reverence gradually became subjects of intense scrutiny and distrust. Their solemn ceremonies, meticulously performed away from public gaze, provided abundant fodder for speculative chatter and malicious hearsay. Were their solemn vows directed solely towards the divine Redeemer, or did they pledge allegiance to a more enigmatic, perhaps even sinister, entity? Did their hallowed, secluded sanctuaries serve as havens for devout supplication, or were they clandestine venues for subversive plotting? In truth, no individual outside the confines of the order possessed any definitive knowledge, and the steadfast reticence maintained by the Templars themselves merely served to amplify the pervasive enigma. Indeed, an absence of explanation can often resonate more powerfully than any direct challenge, inciting profound disquiet. One might readily conjure an evocative image, a formidable Templar preceptory as twilight descended, its ancient, formidable stone ramparts suffused with the warm, shifting glow of a waning sun, or perhaps an early hearth fire. Within, the valiant knights reverently knelt in supplication, their distinctive white cloaks softly kissed by the flickering, dancing shadows cast by candlelight. Beyond the walls, the local populace murmured disquieting tales of doctrinal deviation, their burgeoning anxieties assiduously inflamed by ecclesiastical figures who harbored a distinct eagerness for the order's eventual demise. The earthy aroma of burning timber blended subtly with the fragrant essence of lavender wafting from adjacent fields. In the serene backdrop, the gentle, persistent drone of bees resonated, utterly heedless of the tumultuous human discord. A palpable, profound irony permeated the atmosphere, shrouding the era like an impending tempest. The very warriors who had solemnly pledged themselves to a life of material renunciation found themselves castigated and condemned for their immense accumulated riches. Individuals who had embraced a vow of celibacy and purity faced charges of engaging in depraved and unseemly rituals. The dedicated protectors who had safeguarded the vital pathways of the Christian world were now paradoxically indicted for the ultimate perfidy, a betrayal of Christ himself. It appeared as if the sacred commitments they had made, the very bedrock of their existence, had been perversely inverted and cynically reshaped into the instruments of their own destruction. The veracity of these allegations continues to be a subject of vigorous scholarly contention among historians. A segment of academic opinion maintains that the Templars' culpability extended no further than an unfortunate blend of hubris and excessive territorial ambition. Conversely, other scholars propose the intriguing possibility that their esoteric ceremonies might have incorporated peculiar customs, assimilated perhaps from Eastern or Western mystical traditions, which inevitably affronted and scandalized conventional Orthodox sensibilities. Nevertheless, even those inclined towards skepticism concede that the relentless and brutal intensity of the systematic campaign waged against them appears strikingly incommensurate with a simple covetousness for their financial holdings. It suggests a more profound apprehension, a hidden element that the enigmatic knights guarded with resolute taciturnity. Consequently, the existential assault upon the order commenced, not with the blunt force of siege engines, but with the insidious weaponry of calumny, pervasive whispers, and damning indictments. Their very adherence to spiritual tenets was perverted into a destructive conflagration, and the valiant Templars discovered themselves encircled, not by their traditional adversaries, the Saracens, upon distant battlefields, but by powerful monarchs and zealous ecclesiastics within the confines of their native lands. The distinctive white mantles, which had once radiated as emblems of unblemished virtue, now, to the jaundiced gaze of the distrustful, seemed to serve as shrouds enveloping insidious malevolence. And in the unnerving stillness preceding the cataclysm, the industrious bees of Provence continued their gentle murmuring, almost as if deriding the profound foolishness of humanity, which so readily conflated quietude with culpability and discretion with transgression. The fateful dawn of October 13th, 1307, unfurled across the breadth of France, cloaked in a cool, atmospheric haze. It happened to be a Friday, a date destined to become indelibly inscribed within the annals of popular superstition for all subsequent ages. Throughout the myriad urban centers and provincial hamlets of the realm, detachments of soldiers advanced with an eerie quietude, their heavy boots rhythmically impacting the ancient cobblestones, their precise directives meticulously concealed until the precise instant of apprehension. Upon the solemn pealing of the designated church bells, the meticulously devised snare was sprung with ruthless efficiency. The Knights Templar, an order previously deemed beyond reproach and untouchable, were summarily apprehended within their various commanderies, forcibly removed from their sacred chapels, and formally charged with transgressions more heinous and morally reprehensible than any brutality witnessed on a field of conflict. Conventional historical accounts frequently depict this operation as a stroke of unparalleled strategic genius on the part of King Philip IV. Being profoundly indebted to the wealthy Templar order, the monarch meticulously engineered their calamitous collapse with an unyielding and exact methodology. Pope Clement V, despite initial reservations and evident reluctance, ultimately succumbed to the relentless coercion exerted by Philip. The subsequent apprehensions, juridical proceedings, and the incriminating admissions forcibly extorted through the application of torture by fire and metal were arguably more akin to a carefully staged dramatic performance than a genuine pursuit of equity. Nonetheless, speculative hypotheses continue to proliferate within the realm of historical conjecture. Should the monarch's sole objective have been the acquisition of financial assets, why then employ such a degree of clandestine execution and overwhelming coercive power? Why proceed with an urgency that suggested an apprehension not merely of armed opposition, but of an elusive vanishing act? A prevailing theory posits that the king possessed foreknowledge that the knights commanded assets far exceeding mere monetary riches, implying they had conveyed away crucial documents, sacred relics, or perhaps even significant personages, such as royal heirs. Indeed, popular lore frequently recounts that the Templars, with remarkable foresight, had anticipated the impending assault. Consequently, their formidable maritime fleet, previously at anchor in the vital port of La Rochelle, inexplicably disappeared almost entirely within the span of a single night. Vessels that were unequivocally slated for confiscation instead glided stealthily into the concealing embrace of the dense sea fog, reportedly laden with invaluable treasures that no monarch ever subsequently managed to acquire. The ultimate destiny of this elusive fleet remains a contentious point among erudite scholars. Certain academics contend that the fleet, in such a purported magnitude, never actually existed, positing that its narrative was an imaginative fabrication constructed retrospectively. Conversely, other researchers observe that documented records pertaining to Templar ships cease with an abruptness so striking as to suggest they were either consumed by the oceanic depths or meticulously veiled by an impenetrable curtain of clandestine operations. Did these mysterious vessels chart a northward course towards the rugged shores of Scotland, there to seek refuge and succor amongst a network of sympathetic feudal lords? Or did they, with audacious courage, venture across the formidable Atlantic Ocean, navigated by ancient charts rumored to have been exhumed from the hidden recesses beneath Solomon's Temple, centuries prior to the expeditions of Columbus? Alternatively, might they have remained in closer proximity, their invaluable cargo secreted away within subterranean passages beneath the very streets of Paris, patiently awaiting a propitious moment in profound silence? The profound, almost unbearable irony inherent in the events of that particular morning is striking. A monarch, consumed by an insatiable craving for riches, initiated a decisive move to confiscate the assets of his primary creditors, only to discover that the most significant of their holdings had already eluded his grasp. The Templars, publicly stigmatized as heretics, faced charges of venerating spurious deities, while their very accusers, with profound hypocrisy, prostrated themselves before the gleaming altar of avarice. As a contemporary chronicler astutely and somewhat sardonically observed, those who decried the knights for perfidy were themselves masterfully engaged in the most egregious acts of betrayal. Envision, if one can, the stark tableau unfolding in Paris, the once proud white mantles forcibly removed, replaced by the grim reality of chains clanking ominously in the crisp autumnal air. The gentle tendrils of smoke rising from domestic hearths at dawn were starkly juxtaposed with the harsh, piercing cries of denunciation that echoed through the thoroughfares. A somber aroma of cold ash and pervasive dread hung heavy in the city's arteries. In the tranquil monastery gardens adjacent, bees continued their unhurried, somnolent buzzing, utterly detached from the unfolding human catastrophe. Simultaneously, in some undisclosed cove, or perhaps already navigating the vast expanse of the open ocean, the elusive Templar fleet advanced with an almost spectral quietude, its sails appearing as ghostly forms against the enshrouding fog, transporting a profound secret that would forever remain beyond the monarch's grasp. That infamous Friday, synonymous with profound perfidy, swiftly transcended mere historical fact to become an enduring legend. Certain narratives suggest that this act invoked a curse upon Philip himself, whose royal lineage subsequently faltered and extinguished within a single generation, thereby uncannily fulfilling the impassioned, fiery prophecy uttered by Jacques de Molay. Others, with a knowing smile, observe that our pervasive modern superstition concerning Friday the 13th finds its historical genesis in this very event, as if the collective consciousness of the world retained a visceral memory of the egregious betrayal. In this manner, the esteemed order ostensibly collapsed, yet paradoxically did not entirely vanish. For despite the incarceration of their principal leaders and the confiscation of their hallowed chapels, the most profound and vexing question persisted without resolution. Whither did the elusive fleet depart? And what profound enigma did it convey into the ethereal embrace of the mists? The maritime haven of La Rochelle, reposed in an unusual quietude beneath the somber, moisture-laden October heavens. The diligent fishermen who commenced their daily toil before dawn on that particular morning recounted sightings of ships, seemingly devoid of visible crews, their sails unfurled without any customary fanfare, and vessels silently receding as if propelled or directed by an unseen, ethereal agency. The formidable Templar fleet, formerly the crowning glory of their extensive naval assets, was thereafter conspicuously absent from French territorial waters. Its disappearance was so complete as to suggest the ocean itself had either entirely consumed it or meticulously secreted it within some uncharted, clandestine recess of the globe. Even conventional historical documentation readily acknowledges the enigmatic nature of this event. Contemporary chroniclers, without exception, confirmed the presence of numerous vessels. However, subsequent to the monarch's sweeping purges, no comprehensive inventory of these ships ever materialized. King Philip's agents meticulously combed every harbor, every secluded inlet, and even the extensive salt marshes. Yet their wide-ranging investigative efforts yielded nothing but utter void. A faction of historians posits that the fleet might not have been as substantial as rumored, perhaps consisting merely of a modest collection of merchant cage boats that quietly dispersed into various other ports, their distinctive insignias having been judiciously obliterated. Nevertheless, the abrupt and absolute cessation of any trace, a silence deemed far too orderly and impeccably complete, invariably engenders profound suspicion. At this juncture, speculative theories proliferate with the fecundity of bees swarming around a burgeoning hive. Certain hushed conjectures suggest that the fleet navigated northward, towards the rugged territories of Scotland, where Robert the Bruce, then excommunicated and in dire need of political confederates, might have extended a clandestine welcome to the prescribed order. Other vivid imaginings portray the vessels venturing westward across an immense, unmapped ocean, a daring voyage undertaken centuries prior to the expeditions of Columbus, purportedly guided by arcane cartographic documents recovered from the profound subterranean vaults of Jerusalem. Furthermore, a contingent of claimants asserts that the knights, ever pragmatic in their stratagems, had meticulously interred their most invaluable treasures inland before embarking on a deceptive maritime exodus, leaving behind only the skeletal outlines of empty hulls receding into the distant horizon as a clever ruse. The precise nature of this fabled treasure itself continues to be a focal point of intense scholarly and popular debate. Did it consist solely of tangible assets, such as precious metals, glittering gemstones, and venerated holy artifacts? Or rather, did its genuine value reside in an accumulation of profound, esoteric knowledge? Such knowledge might encompass ancient scrolls purportedly recovered from the subterranean chambers beneath Solomon's temple, detailed genealogies meticulously tracing a hallowed bloodline, or even sacred objects whose very existence blurred the conventional distinctions between verifiable history and venerable myth. If this latter interpretation holds true, then their vanishing represented considerably more than a mere fiscal detriment. It constituted, in essence, an audacious expropriation from the very core of Christendom's foundational narrative. To employ a rather dry analogy, the king's eager tax collectors must have experienced a profound disappointment akin to children pilfering a pantry, only to discover all the anticipated jars of delicacies replaced with inert stones. And perhaps, in the hushed confines of some dimly lit seaside tavern, A grizzled fisherman might have chuckled softly into his tankard of ale, savoring the mental image of royal functionaries frantically clutching at deserted docks while the elusive sails of the Templar fleet receded into oblivion beyond the distant horizon. The very port city of La Rochelle itself carried the indelible imprint, the lasting scar, of this inexplicable disappearance. The town's ancient, cobbled thoroughfares, which had previously resonated with the vibrant clamor of commerce, now reverberated with the unsettling undertones of suspicion and pervasive hearsay. The characteristic maritime aromas of saline air, acrid tar, and fresh fish now intertwined with persistent, furtive whispers. They have departed, yet they are not truly absent. They shall assuredly make their reappearance. Even after the passage of several centuries, local inhabitants recounted tales of subterranean passages snaking beneath the ancient warehouses, where figures adorned in white mantles once moved by the flickering illumination of torchlight, meticulously preparing for an unobserved departure that was never intended for public witness. A segment of academic opinion vigorously asserts that the entire narrative surrounding the fabled fleet constitutes nothing more than an imaginative invention, an artfully crafted post facto embellishment designed to perpetuate the enigmatic allure of an order that had suffered a catastrophic downfall. Nevertheless, opposing voices steadfastly maintain that an excessive number of inexplicable lacunae persist within the historical record, citing numerous sworn testimonies from witnesses who claim to have observed ships silently gliding towards the open sea. The very void, the palpable absence, paradoxically functions as a compelling piece of evidence, much like a crucial missing page from an ancient tome that compels the reader to ponder with heightened intensity what profound narrative it once contained. Consequently, the elusive, vanished fleet transformed into a potent, enduring symbol adrift upon the currents of history. For some, it represented a compelling metaphor of unyielding resilience, a beacon of hope suggesting that not every vestige of the Order's legacy had been irrevocably extinguished. To others still, it manifested as a spectral presence upon the watery expanse, conveying profound secrets destined to torment the consciences of monarchs and pontiffs for countless centuries hence. And amidst the gentle, rhythmic murmur of the ceaseless tides, one might yet discern, in the mind's ear, the faint, ethereal creak of rigging, the soft slap of waves against an unseen hull, and the lingering echo of a momentous journey that commenced, but has seemingly never truly concluded. If the formidable Templar naval force did not merely dissipate into thin air, then logically it would have sought refuge. Along the craggy shorelines and beneath tempestuous, cloud-laden heavens, ancient lore recounts tales of concealed havens, of deep, narrow inlets where vessels rested enshrouded by vapor, or of vast sea caverns where the flickering illumination of torches danced upon moist, weeping rock faces. The vast expanse of the ocean, perpetually enduring, possesses an inherent inclination to safeguard its mysteries for durations far exceeding the reigns of any monarch or the pronouncements of any pontiff. A singular, widely accepted historical truth stands unequivocally established. The Knights Templar were exceptionally proficient mariners, possessing extensive naval contingents, not solely stationed in La Rochelle, but also operating from the significant ports of Marseille and Cyprus. Their profound mastery of seafaring arts forged the essential links between Western Europe and the Holy Land, thereby constituting the vital circulatory system for the logistical support of the Crusader campaigns. This particular aspect remains beyond contention. What remains a vigorous subject of scholarly contention, nevertheless, pertains to the ultimate destination of this considerable nautical acumen when the grip of persecution began to constrict around them. Did their vessels disperse amongst the broader currents of commercial shipping, allowing their crews to merge into the ranks of unidentifiable traders? Or did they, perhaps, retreat into meticulously prepared havens, their strategic withdrawal executed with precise planning and coordination? Conjectural narratives proliferated extensively. Certain imaginings depict the Templar Armada securing sanctuary in the Kingdom of Portugal, shielded by the benevolent patronage of King Dinis, whose enduring sympathies reportedly guaranteed that upon the formal dissolution of the monastic military order, its surviving elements would resurface under the guise of the Order of Christ. Other accounts posit that the vessels steered a course further northward into the enshrouding mists of Scotland, a realm where Robert the Bruce and his insurgent forces found themselves under papal excommunication and therefore in dire need of powerful confederates. A more audacious hypothesis advances the notion that a portion of these ships traversed the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean centuries prior to Columbus's documented voyages, bearing not devout pilgrims, but rather custodians of a lineage deemed too hazardous to disclose openly. Amidst the more vivid disagreements, chroniclers engage in fervent discussion regarding whether ancient charts retrieved from venerable scriptoriums, some even murmuring of origins beneath the very foundations of Solomon's Temple, bestowed upon the Templars foreknowledge of territories entirely unknown to medieval Europe. For conventional academics, such propositions are dismissed as whimsical absurdity. Yet, for proponents of less accepted theories, this is precisely the sort of improbable conjecture that appears to offer an unsettlingly comprehensive explanation for numerous anomalies. The mental tableau of these majestic white-sailed cogs navigating purposefully westward has ascended to an almost legendary status. Envision them vividly, their stout wooden hulls emitting low groans with each undulation, the plaintive cries of gulls echoing shrilly from above, the sharp tang of sea salt biting at the atmosphere, and upon their forwardmost sections, stoic knights gazing intently into an uncharted expanse. The ocean itself seems to have acted as an unwitting accomplice, serenely calming its surface for their clandestine transit, concealing their presence beneath its ever-changing, shimmering shroud. Furthermore, a persistent inquiry revolves around the precise nature of the cargo they conveyed. Did their vessels transport massive quantities of gold and silver illicitly removed from the fortified strong rooms of Paris, or perhaps sacred artifacts meticulously enshrouded in fine linen? Could it have been ancient parchments that revealed a portrayal of Christ divergent from the ecclesiastical doctrines, depicting him, for instance, as a spouse and a parent? A humorous suggestion posits that the fleet might have borne nothing more substantial than numerous casks of preserved codfish and a handful of discontented felines, serving as a wry reminder that not every enigma necessitates an elaborate, treasure-laden explanation. Yet even this facetious remark invariably returns to a deeper consideration. What if the sheer mundanity of their freight was, in fact, the most ingenious form of disguise? The port city of La Rochelle itself, it is said, never entirely relinquished its recollections. The local inhabitants would recount, with a knowing, half-amused grin, that whenever a dense, impenetrable fog descended, and the powerful tide rhythmically crashed against the sturdy piers, one could distinctly discern spectral utterances issuing commands in a dialect blending both French and Latin, as if the entire fleet remained anchored there, poised expectantly for a predetermined sign to recommence its journey. Unbelieving academics, predictably, dismiss such anecdotal evidence as mere local embellishment or fanciful folklore. Nevertheless, the enduring tenacity of this particular narrative implies a more profound underlying truth. The collective consciousness of a community frequently retains insights and experiences that formal written records might inadvertently omit or entirely fail to capture. Consequently, the fabled fleet transcends its identity as a mere collection of vessels, transforming instead into an enigmatic conundrum. Did these ships find clandestine anchorage within the rugged Hebridean islands, their sails meticulously stowed amidst the purple heather and ancient stone formations? Did they perhaps venture further, pushing across vast oceanic expanses to remote archipelagos, their sturdy wooden hulls slowly succumbing to decay in uncharted, forgotten harbors? Or did they simply dissipate into the profound anonymity of historical progression, their distinctive banners dismantled, their very names forever consumed by the ceaseless waves? Perhaps the most authentic response resides within the very quietude that envelops their fate. Monarchs and pontiffs alike loudly declared their victory over the order, yet no definitive evidence in the form of sunken wreckage, no corroborating financial records, nor any tangible spoils ever emerged from the depths to conclusively close the chapter on their narrative. What persists instead is the profound stillness of the sea, the protracted sigh of incoming and outgoing tides, the soft sibilance of foam receding across the sandy shores, as if the boundless ocean itself has undertaken a solemn vow of perpetual silence. And should one choose to listen intently on particular evenings, when the moon's ethereal glow casts a silvery sheen upon the moving waters, it becomes remarkably easy to conjure the subtle creak of unseen rigging, the hushed murmurs of men poring over antique charts, and the spectral presence of ships whose momentous journey was, by all accounts, never truly brought to its conclusion. Should the vast oceanic expanse indeed have served as the Templars' principal conduit for evading capture, then Scotland, with its rugged terrain, emerged as their most frequently whispered about haven. The synchronicity of events was strikingly peculiar. In the pivotal year of 1314, precisely when the final Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, faced his fiery demise in the heart of Paris, Robert the Bruce secured his epoch-making triumph at the Battle of Bannockburn. Having been formally excommunicated and effectively severed from the spiritual endorsements of Rome, Bruce possessed minimal cause to apprehend any further ecclesiastical censure. The conditions, according to some proponents, were perfectly aligned for these displaced knights to discover a welcoming refuge beneath the often somber, contemplative heavens of Scotland. A solitary, verifiable historical datum provides a tangible point of reference. Scotland, during that specific epoch, did indeed operate largely beyond the immediate sphere of papal authority, its sovereign being a rebellious ruler engaged in a protracted struggle against the encroaching dominion of England. The Templars, if actively seeking a secure sanctuary, could scarcely have selected a more resolute and independent confederate. From this point forward, however, the historical narrative becomes considerably more ambiguous and elusive. Unconventional theories subtly insinuate that the Templars not only lent their formidable assistance to Bruce's forces at Bannockburn, but were instrumental in dramatically altering the course of the engagement itself. Certain accounts detail a perplexing cavalry assault, featuring heavily armored horsemen who displayed no discernible standards or heraldic device. Their abrupt materialization on the field reportedly instigated widespread disarray and terror among the English ranks. Mainstream historians, however, summarily dismiss these assertions as a mere nationalistic fabrication, adamantly maintaining that no Templar involvement is documented within the contemporary historical records. And yet, one cannot help but observe the remarkable tenacity with which this particular narrative has persisted, as though it were transmitted not as a fanciful fable but as an actual lived recollection. Further disagreements also prevail. Some scholars contend that the surviving fragments of the order were absorbed into the existing Scottish noble families, their original surnames discreetly modified, their distinctive monastic cloaks exchanged for the vibrant patterns of tartan. Other hypotheses suggest they withdrew into secluded monastic establishments, where their esoteric rites were meticulously performed within the confines of ancient stone walls, amidst the gentle murmur of bees in sun-drenched cloisters and the enigmatic dance of candlelight that guarded profound secrets. Still other proponents posit that their concealed objective was considerably more daring, specifically to cultivate Scotland as fertile ground for the continued existence of a significant bloodline. Envision the dramatic Scottish coastline, formidable jagged precipices relentlessly battered by the ceaseless ocean, while gulls soar and circle overhead, resembling fragments of ancient scripture torn from the very firmament, and the atmosphere permeated by the pungent aroma of peat smoke and briny sea salt. Within such an imposing and untamed environment, an entire naval contingent could conceivably disappear without a trace. A natural cave entrance could readily be repurposed into a clandestine place of worship. A crumbling ancient broch, a circular stone tower, might effectively shelter precious scrolls carefully preserved against the pervasive dampness. And if local villagers, at a later juncture, chanced upon cloaked individuals moving silently through the enveloping mist, they might have merely drawn their own garments tighter and consciously feigned complete unawareness of any unusual presence. After all, those who live by the sea, particularly fishermen, are notoriously adept at safeguarding confidences, an aptitude often enhanced by the convivial influence of potent ale. A particular jest endures within the annals of local folklore, suggesting that the Templars introduced not solely sacred artifacts, but also exquisite French vintages, thereby securing immediate popularity within the convivial Highland taverns. Disbelievers, naturally, deride such anecdotes. Yet, it is conceivable that this very detail might account for the exceptional hospitality extended by certain clans to their enigmatic visitors. Few elements are as effective in forging rapid alliances as the sharing of superior libations, especially amidst climatic conditions that penetrate to the very bone. The resonant themes from preceding sections subtly re-emerge at this juncture. The bee, that enduring emblem of quiet diligence, still faintly hums within the ancient abbeys that continue to display intricately carved hexagonal patterns in their stonework. The sacred chalice makes its reappearance, albeit now in the guise of a modest wooden vessel circulated amongst the flickering warmth of clan fires. Even the haunting remembrance of La Rochelle's spectral armada finds a reflection in the ethereal Scottish lochs, where local inhabitants occasionally murmur of phantom ships that reportedly still glide silently, their sails rendered luminous by the moon's silvery illumination. Nevertheless, the fundamental crux of the issue persists as a fiercely debated point. Did the Knights Templar genuinely establish a lasting presence in Scotland? Or is this elaborate narrative merely a construct designed to imbue a nation already rich in mythological heritage with an additional layer of romantic allure? The academic community remains profoundly bifurcated on this subject. Yet, the persistent query endures. Why do such a considerable number of Scottish ecclesiastical structures and stone carvings exhibit iconographic elements that appear strikingly similar to Templar symbolism, such as distinctive crosses, martial swords, and even the ubiquitous bee motif? A mere happenstance, some argue, an unmistakable indication of enduring legacy, others steadfastly maintain. Thus, Scotland transcends the role of a mere scenic setting. It emerges as a grand theatrical arena where the currents of verifiable history and the ethereal threads of folklore intertwine indistinguishably, much like the omnipresent mist and resilient heather, becoming utterly indivisible and almost beyond grasp. Irrespective of whether the Templars ever participated in the Battle of Bannockburn, their spectral influence persists within the Scottish collective consciousness, symbolically draped in tartan and imbued with the tang of sea spray. The vast ocean currents conveyed them to these shores. Perhaps the very land itself provided their ultimate refuge. It remains a tantalizing possibility. But what Scotland undeniably bestowed in reciprocity was something profoundly enduring, a foundational myth so intricately interwoven into its national identity that even today, when one stands captivated by the exquisite and complex stonework of Rosslyn Chapel, it is virtually impossible not to ponder whether the meticulously carved bees adorning its ceiling are simply ornamental flourishes, or in fact, a silent, solemn vow that the ancient secret continues to thrive. Legends, by their very nature, are remarkably tenacious entities. Once firmly embedded, they invariably establish deep roots within the most improbable terrains, occasionally even spanning entire oceans. Among the most audacious of all narratives concerning the Templars is the assertion that their impressive naval contingent navigated not northward towards Scotland, nor eastward to Cyprus, but rather westward into an entirely uncharted realm. Many centuries before Columbus ever committed his navigational theories to parchment, hushed accounts suggest that the Knights Templar meticulously plotted trajectories to a continent of such immense scale that it appeared boundless, a pristine world where neither the authoritative decree of any pontiff nor the fiscal demands of any monarch could conceivably extend their grasp. The verifiable historical reality is sufficiently straightforward. Norse explorers had, in fact, reached the coastlines of North America many centuries prior, leaving behind tangible archaeological evidence at the site of L'Anseau Meadows. This irrefutably demonstrates that transatlantic voyages were indeed feasible, albeit infrequent. Given their established maritime prowess and their acute, pressing necessity for a secure sanctuary, could the Templars conceivably have replicated such a monumental feat? Proponents of alternative historical perspectives exhibit considerable enthusiasm for this theory. They frequently draw attention to the enigmatic Newport Tower in Rhode Island, a peculiar circular stone edifice whose architectural style bears a striking resemblance not to typical colonial gristmills, but rather to the distinctive medieval round churches of Europe, notably those frequently utilized by the Knights Templar. They further highlight the Kensington runestone discovered in Minnesota, a slab of greywacke inscribed with runic characters that purportedly narrate the journey of Norsemen and knights traversing waterways deep within the continental interior. Moreover, they cite the discovery of submerged or buried stones intricately carved with the distinctive Maltese cross, interpreting these as deliberate markers, akin to a trail of breadcrumbs strategically placed for subsequent generations of investigators. Those inclined to doubt often dismiss such claims with a dismissive gesture. They suggest that any unusual markings on stone are merely the casual handiwork of local farmers, perhaps after a convivial evening of ale, rather than ancient inscriptions. They contend that perceived anomalies are simply colonial curiosities, misinterpreted and imbued with exotic significance by overly enthusiastic minds. Yet, despite these rational explanations, a persistent kernel of intrigue and potential truth endures. Academic scholars, ever vigilant in their pursuit of verifiable truth, meticulously scrutinize each alleged relic. The Newport Tower, they assert, was constructed by Governor Benedict Arnold's grandfather during the 17th century, serving no more esoteric purpose than that of a practical windmill. The Kensington runestone, the consensus among learned experts, firmly labels as a 19th century fabrication, and the supposed Templar carvings are deemed mere figments of fervent imagination, conjured from the natural patterns of moss and lichen on ancient stones, fueled by humanity's intrinsic yearning for enigmatic narratives. But the profound question that lingers, an insistent whisper refusing to be silenced, is why these contentious discussions perpetually resurface and endure. Why does a persistent segment of the populace continue to assert, with unwavering conviction, that ancient mariners, perhaps bearing hallowed cargo, ventured across the vast, unexplored expanse of the Western Ocean? One might, for a fleeting moment, transport oneself back to that distant era and envision the profound, almost sacred stillness of the unblemished Atlantic Ocean during the 14th century. An epoch devoid of established maritime routes, without the guidance of meticulously drawn charts adorned with intricate compass roses, only an immeasurable expanse of cerulean water stretching to the horizon, punctuated by the circling, insistent calls of seabirds, whose presence in such an unlikely locale would serve as an unmistakable harbinger of approaching shores. One could almost hear the rhythmic groan of wooden masts, the bracing impact of briny spray against weathered timbers, and perceive the subtle, comforting aroma of beeswax candles casting a soft glow within the confines of the captain's humble cabin, as hushed supplications were murmured into the night. Within that confined space, perhaps a venerated chalice found a secure resting place, or an ancient parchment, its delicate script, quivering with the gentle undulations of the vessel, was carefully unfurled. A vein of understated wit occasionally permeates these speculative narratives, as not every proponent of such theories approaches the subject with unyielding gravity. There are those who playfully suggest that, should the Templar Knights indeed have made landfall in the Americas, they would undoubtedly hold the distinction of being the inaugural Europeans to lament the cost of indigenous foodstuffs, or perhaps more acutely, the lamentable absence of their beloved French cheeses. Further jests propose that honeybees, those industrious insects, might have been part of their transatlantic cargo, thereby offering an explanation for the perplexing presence of certain wild apiaries in regions where no documented introduction of the species exists. The most whimsical of these conjectures paints a picture of Templar knights, their polished armor glinting under an alien sun, utterly perplexed by the novel flavor of maize bread, pondering whether this strange sustenance constituted a sacred artifact or simply their evening meal. Despite these light-hearted digressions, the enduring power of this myth persists, resonating deeply because it encapsulates a profound emotional authenticity. The beleaguered Templars, facing persecution and dissolution, were in desperate need of an escape, and the boundless world stretching beyond the known horizon offered an intoxicating promise of liberation. While the rugged landscapes of Scotland could conceivably offer temporary sanctuary for a generation, only an entire continent, vast and untamed, possessed the capacity to shelter them for centuries. The very concept of America, perceived as immense, pristine, and shrouded in secrecy, aligned flawlessly with their compelling narrative of clandestine flight and prolonged concealment. The recurring motif, the insistent echo from the past, remains strikingly distinct. That enigmatic fleet, which ostensibly disappeared from the port of La Rochelle, and which legend suggests found clandestine refuge along the rugged Scottish coastlines, is also theorized to have embarked upon an even more audacious westward journey. Whether the hypothesized route led northward or westward, both directions reverberate with the identical vexing inquiry: what became of the fabled wealth and sacred artifacts of the Knights Templar? Unsurprisingly, the academic community, with its rigorous standards of evidence, remains deeply divided on this contentious subject. A segment of historians summarily dismisses these narratives as little more than a romanticized projection of modern America's profound desire for a venerable, noble lineage, a means to intricately intertwine its nascent identity with the ancient, knightly heritage of Europe. Conversely, other scholars, while maintaining a degree of academic circumspection, concede that medieval mariners possessed a spirit of adventurousness and navigational prowess far exceeding contemporary estimations, acknowledging that the demarcation between verifiable fact and captivating fable becomes notably more permeable when traversing the vast, unpredictable expanses of the ocean than on solid ground. Thus, the compelling legend of Templar crossings continues to waft across the formidable Atlantic, much like a ghostly vessel momentarily perceived through the shrouding mists. Did these ancient knights truly erect a cross upon an American beach centuries prior to Christopher Columbus's celebrated arrival and the raising of his standard? Perhaps such an event remains beyond the realm of concrete historical proof. Yet, the true enigma resides not so much in a definitive answer, but rather in the tenacious endurance of the question itself, and in those tranquil hours of twilight, as ocean waves gently break upon the shore like murmured devotions. One can almost conjure the image of armored figures having once trod upon sands entirely unmapped by European cartographers, their physical traces long vanished, but their extraordinary narrative forever persisting. Far beneath the bustling thoroughfares of Paris, a sprawling subterranean labyrinth unfolds, meticulously sculpted from ancient quarries, its very atmosphere redolent with the earthy, cool aroma of damp limestone. Within this profound darkness, faint echoes persist, the phantom sound of footsteps, the ghostly murmur of forgotten prayers, and the almost palpable sigh of concealed chambers, hermetically sealed for countless centuries. It is within this shadowy realm that whispers circulate, suggesting that the Knights Templar secreted away their most profound mysteries, not within impregnable castles or across tempestuous seas, but rather directly beneath the spiritual and temporal core of Christendom itself. Verifiable historical documentation confirms that the Knights Templar, in their zenith, possessed extensive and significant properties within the burgeoning city of Paris. Their formidable fortified complex, known simply as the Temple, functioned as a self-contained city unto itself, comprising imposing towers, sacred chapels, grand halls, and secure vaults, all meticulously guarded by knights arrayed in their distinctive white mantles. Within the protective embrace of those stone walls, royal sovereigns entrusted their most valuable treasures, weary pilgrims discovered spiritual sanctuary, and diligent clerks meticulously documented countless financial transactions in their precise, legible script. Consequently, when Philip IV of France launched his decisive campaign against the order, it was these immensely valuable Parisian strongholds that he most ardently desired to seize. The temple itself was violently assailed, and its defending knights were forcibly removed. Yet, with a striking absence, the vast wealth that had been entrusted to their stewardship was conspicuously missing. It is precisely in this context that speculative theories, much like tenacious wildflowers, flourish in the neglected recesses of the subterranean catacombs. Certain proponents assert that the Templars engineered an intricate network of tunnels beneath their formidable fortress, constructing clandestine chambers specifically designed to safeguard relics deemed too sacrosanct to ever fall into unhallowed possession. Still others maintain that concealed passages extended into the vast, honeycombed expanse of Paris's ancient quarries, where sealed entrances, adorned with enigmatic, long-forgotten symbols, patiently await rediscovery. Even the recurring motif of bees reappears in these narratives, envisioned as minuscule, vigilant guardians depicted in carvings meticulously etched into stones that have remained unseen by human eyes for uncounted centuries. Those of a skeptical disposition, naturally, respond with a knowing smile, gently proposing that if indeed any Templar knights did manage to conceal riches beneath the earth, such treasures would have, by now, long since fallen prey to the industrious depredations of subterranean rodents. Academic historians engage in vigorous debate regarding the verisimilitude of these elaborate subterranean legends. A faction asserts that there is a conspicuous absence of tangible proof for extensive underground hoards, no credible cartographic representations, and no verified chambers other than those demonstrably employed for ordinary utilitarian storage purposes. Conversely, other scholars highlight the meticulous records compiled by Philip IV's diligent clerks, which indicate the recovery of only remarkably modest financial sums following the widespread arrests of the Templars. Yet, an insistent counter-argument invariably emerges. If the monarch's agents indeed recovered such a paltry amount, then the crucial question remains: what became of the colossal remainder? The formidable vaults of the temple had, at one time, safeguarded the immense gold reserves of European monarchs, yet the subsequent inventories presented a financial picture akin to the meager holdings of a humble tradesman. This stark discrepancy strongly implies that something significant had been either systematically relocated, cleverly concealed, or indeed, mysteriously spirited away. Envision, if you will, the experience of venturing deep into these enigmatic subterranean realms, The very air progressively chills, carrying a subtle, mineral tang of ancient salt and profound age, as if the very bedrock itself were gently exhaling the accumulated breath of bygone centuries. Flickering torchlight dances erratically, causing distorted shadows to stretch and recede, while the sharp scrape of boots reverberates with an almost startling intensity. A palpable sensation, a veritable weight of untold secrets, seems to bear down from the imposing vaulted ceilings above. Conceivably, a sealed chamber lies undisturbed, its entrance crudely bricked over in a hurried act of concealment. And beyond that hastily erected barrier, one might fantasize about a sturdy chest, brimming with ancient scrolls, or a sacred chalice meticulously enveloped in protective waxed cloth. Alternatively, the discovery might yield nothing but an expanse of ancient dust and profound silence, a masterful deception, perhaps the most ingenious stratagem ever devised by the Knights Templar. The distinctive wit of Paris, characterized by its subtle and often ironic nature, invariably infiltrates even the most somber of narratives. Certain local wags suggest that the only true treasure interred beneath the site of the temple today is a profound sense of disappointment, akin to the bitter taste of a substandard bottle of wine acquired at an exorbitant cost. Further jests propose that had the Templars genuinely excavated an extensive network of tunnels, the resourceful Parisians would have, centuries past, already repurposed them into convenient wine cellars. A particularly dry-witted poet once sagely remarked that if any genuine treasure did indeed lie hidden beneath the venerable city of Paris, it would have, by now, undoubtedly been long since exchanged for the city's ubiquitous and beloved cheese. Such observations, while delivered with an acerbic charm, may not be entirely devoid of truth. For what, ultimately, is the grand narrative of history but an extended chronicle of accumulated wealth being transmuted into governmental levies and public expenditure? Nonetheless, the compelling mental image endures, that of an invaluable cache concealed directly beneath the very foundations traversed daily by millions of inhabitants. One envisions a clandestine archive, resonating with a profound, almost audible silence, its contents vigilantly protected by the inexorable passage of time itself. Above this imagined realm, the vibrant metropolis of Paris ceaselessly bustles, the resonant pealing of church bells, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobblestones, and now the pervasive rumble of modern automobiles. Yet beneath, if the persistent narratives hold true, reposes the undisturbed tranquility of a crypt that has remained inviolate for centuries. The reverberation, the thematic resonance, is remarkably distinct and insistent, in precisely the same manner that the rugged Scottish Highlands and the vast Atlantic Ocean have harbored elusive whispers of clandestine concealment. So too does the very bedrock of Paris vigilantly preserve its profound subterranean silence. The recurring motif, the persistent archetype, manifests once more. Valuables mysteriously disappear. Historical documentation presents irreconcilable contradictions. A profound quietude prevails. The faint hum of bees resonates in collective memory. Knights are imagined to ride forth in hushed legends. Sacred chalices shimmer tantalizingly in the mind's inner vision, and the vigorous scholarly contention steadfastly persists. Did an actual concealed vault truly exist beneath the ancient fabric of Paris? Or is this entire narrative merely an acoustic reverberation of humanity's insatiable craving for enigma, echoing through the vast, dark caverns of the catacombs? Certain historians, with unwavering conviction, decisively conclude the matter. There exists no substantiating evidence. Yet others hesitate at the very precipice of certainty, acknowledging the philosophical truth that a mere lack of proof does not, in itself, constitute definitive proof of non-existence. Thus, the receptive imagination readily conjures the scene, the subtle rhythmic drip of water in the profound darkness, the coarse texture of ancient stone walls, grazed by tentative fingertips, the profound awareness that beneath the colossal weight of the city lies a stillness too immeasurable to be quantified. Regardless of whether the Templars actually interred their secrets within this subterranean realm, Paris has, in the collective consciousness, transformed into their symbolic sepulchre. And what, fundamentally, defines a tomb, if not a narrative interred prematurely, patiently awaiting the arrival of an individual sufficiently courageous, or perhaps sufficiently imprudent, to unearth its concealed truths. Upon a frigid March evening in the year 1314, the historic Ile de la Cité found itself enshrouded in a pervasive twilight mist, lending an ethereal quality to the venerable Parisian landmark. The river Seine, a somber ribbon of slow-moving gray, meandered languidly, its gentle current carrying the evocative aroma of damp wood and the lingering scent of smoke. A considerable throng of spectators had congregated near the imposing silhouette of Notre Dame Cathedral, their exhaled breaths forming ephemeral pale clouds in the chilled air, as they pressed intently forward to witness a somber and chilling public spectacle. At the very epicenter of this grim assembly stood Jacques de Molay, the final revered Grand Master of the Knights Templar, his form secured to a sturdy execution post, his distinguished white beard, illuminated by the flickering firelight, seemed to glow with an almost incandescent, ash-like luminosity, and his voice, remarkably unwavering despite the heavy constraints of his chains, resounded clearly above the hushed murmurs of the gathered onlookers. The annals of history meticulously document de Molay's condemnation to a fiery death, ostensibly for egregious acts of heresy, profound blasphemy, and an extensive litany of alleged transgressions so monstrous in their nature as to defy credulity. For centuries, erudite scholars have consistently maintained that these accusations were nothing more than elaborate fabrications, ingeniously concocted by King Philip IV as a pretext to utterly dismantle the powerful order and confiscate its vast accumulated wealth. Nevertheless, on that fateful evening, the assembled populace did not perceive the intricate legal wrangling of barristers or the furtive murmurs of royal scribes. Instead, what resonated through the chilling air was solely the resolute voice of a defiant old knight, publicly imprecating both the reigning monarch and the pontiff, vehemently asserting his unblemished innocence, and issuing a solemn summons for his accusers to appear before the divine judgment of God within the span of a single year. The verifiable historical reality, in its stark simplicity, possesses an inherently chilling quality. Indeed, within a mere handful of months following de Molay's execution, both King Philip IV and Pope Clement V had tragically met their demise. The monarch succumbed to a sudden debilitating illness, while the pontiff perished from a peculiar and inexplicable affliction. For those living in that era, such a swift succession of deaths was perceived as far more than mere happenstance. It was interpreted as the undeniable fulfillment of a solemn curse, a direct divine judgment unequivocally delivered from the very flames of the pyre. To those of a more rationalist and skeptical inclination, naturally, these deaths were attributed to the inevitable ravages of mortality and the stresses of their demanding positions. After all, the rigors of medieval diets, often unbalanced and unhygienic, combined with the immense political and spiritual pressures, were more than sufficient to curtail the lifespan of any ruler or religious leader. Nevertheless, the uncanny synchronicity of these events continues to persist, a haunting question mark lingering in the historical atmosphere, much like the spectral tendrils of smoke. Speculative theories have adorned Jacques de Molay's final stand with intricate threads of clandestine mystery. Some proponents maintain that his execution represented not an ultimate demise, but rather a cunning ruse, suggesting that a surrogate met the fiery end in his stead, while the genuine Grand Master discreetly slipped away into banishment, meticulously safeguarding the most profound secrets of the Knights Templar. Others envisioned de Molay's ashes being surreptitiously collected by loyal sympathizers, reverently concealed within hallowed containers, and subsequently bequeathed as poignant tokens of an unbroken fraternity. A few narratives venture even further, positing that the pronouncements he uttered were not merely a curse, but a meticulously coded vow, a solemn pledge that his adherents would perpetually sustain the Order's existence in the shadows, patiently awaiting the epoch when the world would once more require their presence. Historians contend incessantly, even regarding the nature of the assembled crowd. Some assert that thousands must have observed the harrowing event, their collective testimonies later molding the burgeoning legend. Others, however, cast doubt upon these specific details, pointing out that various historical chronicles frequently clash with one another. Certain accounts depict an incandescent column of flame, while others describe a protracted, agonizing combustion. Even the precise geographical spot, whether situated near the majestic cathedral or further along the meandering riverbank, remains a contested point. What is undeniably certain is that the indelible image of a knight burning with unwavering dignity, his final words unbroken by the inferno, permeated the very fabric of European collective memory. The sensory tapestry of that precise moment is effortlessly evoked. One can almost feel the pungent bite of burning wood and wool, hear the sharp sizzle of flame voraciously licking at timber, and sense the profound silence that descends when a condemned individual steadfastly refuses to utter a scream. The assembled multitude stirs restlessly. Children clutch protectively at their mothers, and one might even imagine a solitary bee humming by the torch, drawn to the searing heat as though it, too, bore a clandestine imperative. Above it all, de Molay's voice does not waver, carried on the capricious wind like a final, solemn supplication. There exists room, even amidst such profound gravity, for a sardonic commentary. One Parisian humorist purportedly quipped that the monarch had roasted his evening meal rather early that night, a somber witticism that circulated covertly in whispers until the royal guards quelled it with stern glares. Another playfully mused that the Templar master appeared more akin to a saint than an alleged heretic, though saints typically prefer a more refreshing atmosphere. Such was the dry humor, fragile as ancient vellum, yet humor nonetheless. And centuries later, an acerbic academic mischievously noted that if curses truly possessed the power to dethrone rulers, Europe would have been governed by tavern poets, not by kings. The reverberation is unmistakably strong. Once more, the Templars appear to dissipate at the very juncture when their visibility should be at its most conspicuous. Their Grand Master perishes, yet his final pronouncements resonate more powerfully than the consuming flames. Their vast treasures evaporate, yet their persecutors soon join them in oblivion. This recurring pattern mirrors earlier Templar enigmas, the absent armada, the concealed coffers of Paris, the symbolic bees vibrating in stillness. Always an inexplicable void, always speculative rumor, always a persistent specter. De Molay's death formally signified the dissolution of the Knights Templar in the estimation of both the Church and the Crown. Yet, legends steadfastly maintain that the execution ignited not merely a funeral pyre, but a beacon, suggesting that somewhere, someone secretly perpetuated the Order's legacy. His ultimate utterances are remembered less as an act of insubordination and more as a profound presage. And so, as the Seine meandered serenely by and the night closed in, Paris assimilated the fire, the smoke, and the profound silence that ensued. Some citizens returned home feeling disquieted, persuaded they had witnessed not simply death, but divine judgment. Others dismissed it lightly, reverting to their daily bread and wine. Nevertheless, the visage endures, an aged knight in shackles, standing taller in the inferno than he ever did in life, leaving behind not mere ashes, but a curse that history has never quite managed to extricate itself from. When Jacques de Molay's ashes dispersed upon the Seine, the Church authoritatively proclaimed the Templars defunct. Their extensive lands had been expropriated, their treasures appropriated, and their knights dispersed to foreign lands. Yet rumors endured, adhering like tendrils of ivy to ruined masonry. The Templars, it was whispered, were not truly gone, merely concealed. A brotherhood operating in the shadows, some asserted, meticulously preserving their ceremonies, their intricate codes, and their sacred oaths within clandestine sanctuaries where the reach of fire and crown could not penetrate. The conventional historical understanding posits that many Templars were integrated within other knightly orders, particularly the Knights of the Round Table Hospitaller, or discreetly reverted to civilian existence. A select few became soldiers of fortune, offering their swords to any lord willing to compensate their services. Nevertheless, in regions exhibiting greater independence from papal authority, their survival seemed more assured. In Portugal, King Dinis simply rechristened them the Order of Christ, bestowing upon them new vestments, but safeguarding their unbroken lineage. It was an ingenious maneuver. On paper, it demonstrated deference to pontifical edict. In practice, the very essence of the Templars continued to endure beneath a different banner. Speculative theories flourish wherever mysteries accumulate. Scotland is frequently depicted as their haven, its fog-shrouded uplands offering an ideal asylum for absconding chevaliers. There, popular traditions assert, they forged an alliance with Robert the Bruce, riding into the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 to decisively alter the course of the conflict against the English. No historical analyst records their presence, of course, but folklore insists that cloaked figures in pallid raiment appeared amidst the chaos, instilling dread before dissipating once more into the annals of history. Another captivating tale carries them across the vast Atlantic centuries prior to Columbus, piloting their absent armada to America's uncharted coastlines. One can almost envision the groaning of the mast and ropes in the nocturnal quiet, a solitary bee landing on a ship's mast as if to sanctify the audacious voyage. Historians contend incessantly over these various claims. Some dismiss them as whimsical embellishments, idealized narratives fabricated long after the actual events. Others assert that the very persistence of such enduring whispers suggests a modicum of veracity. The paucity of documentation, paradoxically, serves as both their vulnerability and their fortitude. Silence may imply non-existence, but it can also signify profound clandestinity. One acerbic academic once observed, "The Templars possess the distinct advantage that ghosts rarely find it necessary to produce receipts." The sensory world of this supposed underground brotherhood is more conceived than chronicled. Envision a stone cellar beneath a rustic farmhouse. Torches dance against moisture-laden masonry. Knights kneel in hushed supplication before a crudely carved crucifix. The fragrance of consecrated wax candles intertwines with the scent of damp earth. The faint murmur of a river rushes distantly overhead. Perhaps the only observers were the shadows themselves, elongating with gravity across the cold floor. Humor endures, even within the shadows of intrigue. One satirist posited that if the Templars genuinely persisted in subterranean realms, they must have pioneered vaults not for viticulture, but primarily for their clandestine meetings, though wine undoubtedly aided their deliberations. Another mused that their clandestinity was so absolute that not even the mice could locate them, though in fairness, mice were famously inept at deciphering classical documents. And of course, the Scottish narrative of Bannockburn prompts its own sardonic witticism. If enigmatic chevaliers won the day, the least they could have done was present the invoice. The reverberation is unmistakable. Just as the fleet had dissipated across the oceans, so too the order now dissolved on terra firma. Again and again, history confronts voids, and such absence invariably fosters speculation. Like bees hovering around a sealed apiary, storytellers perpetually return to the Templars. Disappearance, diligently searching for concealed honey within the honeycomb. Whether depicted as veiled remnants in Portugal, spectral horsemen in Scotland, or intrepid navigators of uncharted waters, the Templar legend steadfastly declined to succumb to oblivion. It became unquiet, pushing through the fissures of official silence, occupying the lacunae where records failed with compelling narratives of fraternity, retribution, and sacred purpose. To those who believed, their survival was not merely a potentiality, but an imperative. For how could a mission so hallowed, custodians of the sacred edifice, keepers of an ancestral lineage, perhaps even preservers of the holy vessel, conclude upon a Parisian pyre? The historical truth may indeed be more unromantic. Yet mystery possesses its own inherent resilience. In every inn, in every monastery, in every poorly illuminated nook where travelers murmured accounts, the Templars persisted. They became more recollection than personage, more legend than remembrance. A brotherhood perhaps dispersed, perhaps annihilated, but in story at least, perpetually genuflecting, ever vigilant, eternally expectant. Through centuries of hearthside narratives and murmured traditions, one potent symbol adhered tenaciously to the Templars, the Holy Grail. Yet what exactly was this sacred chalice? Was it a gilded goblet sanctified by the Messiah at the Last Supper, or something considerably more arcane, an animate entity perhaps? The Grail transformed itself into less an artifact and more a reflection, mirroring the profound aspirations of those who earnestly sought it. The established historical reality persists. Medieval Grail romances flourished in the concurrent era that witnessed the rise of the Templars. Chrétien de Troyes, Wolfram von Eschenbach. These poets skillfully crafted narratives of knights earnestly seeking a receptacle that possessed the power to cure monarchs and revitalize desolate lands. The Templars are never explicitly identified in these texts, yet their presence lingers subtly, as if the tales themselves were encrypted anthems dedicated to their mission. Monasteries transcribed such romances with serene dedication, even as popes vehemently denounced Templar clandestinity. It is almost as if the Grail, too, became a clandestine conduit for conveying concealed verities beyond the watchful gaze of officialdom. Conjectural narratives subsequently reinterpreted the Grail not as a goblet, but as an ancestral lineage, specifically the uterus of Mary Magdalene, perpetually carrying forward the progeny of Jesus himself. To such storytellers, the Templars were never simple financiers or combatants. They were, instead, the revered custodians of the Sangreal, the royal blood. One can almost envision them in flame-illuminated sanctuaries, administering vows, not over auric goblets, but over pedigrees inscribed in vermilion. Bees, returning to their hive, would drone with affirmation at such an ancestry safeguarded in clandestinity, the precious nectar of the past, protected from covetous grasp. Yet, intense scholarly contention continues to escalate concerning this particular assertion. Many erudite academics contend that medieval manuscripts offer scant textual substantiation for the notion of the Grail embodying a bloodline. Such interpretations, they adamantly insist, are contemporary fabrications, superimposed retrospectively by authors seeking sensational narratives. Conversely, another faction of researchers posits that profound emblems frequently lie concealed beneath layers of elaborate allegory. Perhaps, they suggest, depicting a mere chalice was a far more prudent and less perilous literary choice than alluding to a sacred lineage or a child. This persistent dispute, it is sometimes observed, bears a striking resemblance to the earnest discussions of cloistered monks debating whether the faint hum of a bee constitutes a melodic sound or mere ambient noise, with each party firmly convinced of their singular, accurate perception. The imaginative depth of the Grail myth presents a remarkably vivid sensory tapestry. One might readily conjure images of the flickering torchlight casting an ethereal glow upon exquisitely polished metallic surfaces, or perhaps envision the deeper, more enigmatic luster emanating from a uniquely curvaceous, almost organic reliquary secreted away within the hallowed confines of some ancient cathedral's treasury. One can almost perceive the cool, venerable touch of the stone flagstones within tranquil cloisters, where contemplative monks once earnestly deliberated whether the fabled Grail was fashioned from humble wood, enduring stone, or perhaps even a rare, gleaming emerald. The air might carry the soft, resonant murmur of Latin verses, intoned as twilight descends, their collective voices ascending gracefully, much like the industrious hum of bees hovering over vast, heathered fields. Furthermore, the distinctive aroma of incense, spiraling in ethereal tendrils through the grand, vaulted chapels, serves as a poignant reminder that the essence of profound mystery can never be entirely confined within a single receptacle, irrespective of its specific form or material. Even amidst such profound and mystical speculation, a distinct vein of humor invariably surfaces. One ancient storyteller, with a twinkle in their eye, once jokingly observed that if the fabled Grail were indeed a mere cup, it must surely rank as the most persistently mislaid piece of tableware in all of history. having evidently been perpetually vanishing ever since that fateful Last Supper. Another commentator, with a touch of irony, pointed out that any devoted knight who consecrated his entire existence to the arduous quest for a simple goblet must, by logical extension, have undoubtedly forewent numerous evening repasts. And with characteristic dry wit, an astute contemporary academic once sagely remarked, "Should the Grail truly represent a sacred bloodline, then the authentic relics are not physical objects, but rather intricate family trees, and those, unlike easily handled cups, are famously resistant to any form of polishing or superficial enhancement." A resonant echo from previous narratives now reverberates through this discussion. In earlier accounts concerning the Templars' clandestine fraternity, we depicted them reverently bowed within subterranean chambers, their beeswax candles casting dancing, erratic shadows. This prompts the profound inquiry: what precisely were they safeguarding with such profound discretion? While precious metals possess considerable heft, and sacred goblets betray their presence with metallic sounds, vital fluids flow with an inherent quietude, offering a warmth that is both intimate and perpetually resilient. Perhaps, then, it was not a mere hoard of material wealth they meticulously preserved, but rather a hereditary succession, a lineage impervious to dissolution or material transformation. Thus, the myth of the Grail persists, continually reinterpreted and reshaped across epochs, at times envisioned as a sacred vessel, at others as an ancient scroll, or even as a symbolic womb. It transcends being a mere tangible artifact, evolving instead into an enduring inquiry, one that steadfastly resists definitive resolution or being entirely emptied of its meaning. And akin to industrious bees hovering around a blossoming flower, each successive generation returns to partake of its essence, discerning notes of profound satisfaction, inherent sorrow, and inscrutable enigma in equal measure. Beneath the majestic, vaulted ceilings and soaring arches of medieval chapels, the very atmosphere often became dense with the rich fragrance of incense, the faint exhalation of candle smoke, and the subdued swish of ecclesiastical vestments. Yet, directly beneath these very same hallowed structures, deep below their gleaming, polished altars and the resonant echoes of their choirs, a more clandestine and hushed narrative resides. For unsubstantiated rumors continue to circulate, alleging that the formidable Knights Templar engaged in esoteric rituals deliberately concealed from the scrutinizing gaze of both powerful bishops and reigning monarchs. Ceremonies, it is claimed, that perilously obscured the demarcation between orthodox belief and heterodox practice. One incontrovertible historical fact remains undeniably established. The Knights Templar either erected or held sway over numerous chapels spanning the European continent, from the bustling city of Lyon in France to the remote mystical Rosslyn in Scotland. A significant proportion of these edifices incorporated crypts and extensive subterranean chambers, initially intended for the safekeeping of provisions, as a sanctuary, or perhaps, contingent upon one's interpretive lens, for the clandestine performance of secret rituals. Periodical accounts from their era frequently leveled accusations against the Templars, alleging acts such as renouncing the Christ figure, desecrating the crucifix with spittle, or venerating enigmatic effigies. While the majority of modern historians categorically reject these indictments as fabrications extracted under duress, admissions coerced through brutal physical means, certain enduring narratives persist, Speaking of nocturnal observances, where only hushed utterances and the faint glow of tapers served as silent observers, conjecture flourishes profusely regarding these purported practices. It is posited by some that the Templars acted as guardians of arcane ceremonies, initiations derived from ancient intellectual and spiritual streams, perhaps drawing from enigmatic Gnostic traditions, the profound teachings of Jewish Kabbalah, or even vestigial fragments of ancient Egyptian sacerdotal practices unearthed within the sacred territories of the Holy Land. In the context of such theories, their revered effigy was not a malevolent spirit, but rather a hallowed artifact, conceivably the venerable skull of John the Baptist, or an unusual reliquary resembling the intricate structure of a beehive. The recurring motif of bees, naturally, reappears at this juncture, for the apiary itself is often considered the primordial sanctuary, a structure perpetually resounding with hushed, sacred chants that require no grand pipe organ to accompany their timeless melody. Intense academic contention continues to escalate concerning whether the Templars engaged in any truly anomalous practices whatsoever. Some scholars resolutely contend that the accusations of heresy were entirely politically motivated contrivances, ingeniously devised by King Philip IV of France, to appropriate their substantial assets and undermine their influence. Others, while conceding the probable existence of clandestine vows and graduated initiatory rites, a common feature, after all, among most knightly orders of the era, express considerable doubt that these practices deviated significantly from established religious doctrine. This ongoing polemic is akin to cloistered monks disputing whether the ephemeral forms projected onto the subterranean chapel walls were indeed tangible entities or mere optical illusions created by flickering illumination. Both factions, however, concur on one crucial point. Whatever the Templars conducted in the depths of their underground sanctuaries, it undeniably provoked sufficient alarm among their adversaries to warrant their ultimate brutal immolation. The evocative power of the sensory imagery associated with these hidden spaces is remarkably strong. One might readily picture oneself navigating a winding flight of constricted stone steps downwards, entering a cold, subterranean burial chamber, one's fingers grazing against coarse masonry, perpetually moist from centuries of accumulated condensation. There, one could hear the reverberating thud of footwear on ancient flagstones, punctuated by the sporadic patter of moisture from concealed fissures. The air would carry the distinct aromas of beeswax, saline earth, and the subtle, sweet undertone of myrrh. In the dim, diffused illumination, one might discern glimpses of once vibrant frescoes, now muted by the relentless passage of time, depicting hallowed figures gazing from the murals, seemingly in silent judgment of whatever unfolds below. As the flaming brand hisses and sputters erratically, for a fleeting instant, one might even perceive the phantom resonance of liturgical chanting, even in the absence of any audible human voice. Even within the shadowy depths of this historical narrative, a touch of levity emerges. One medieval chronicler, with a penchant for the outlandish, asserted that the Templars venerated a feline creature in their secret ceremonies. Such an outlandish particularity prompts one to question if it was perhaps concocted by a cloistered brother with an aversion to young felines. Another anecdote maintained that their revered effigy was a golden head adorned with precious jewels as eyes, leading some to muse that it was perhaps merely an ill-fated sculpted likeness of a saint whose ocular features had been restored with excessive zeal. And a modern scholar, after sifting through an incessant torrent of conjecture, once exhaled with a weary resignation, declaring, "If the Templars really did worship a bearded head, it only proves they possessed superior aesthetic sensibilities in their internal arrangements compared to their inquisitors." Resonant echoes begin to coalesce within the penumbra of these narratives. We once observed their naval contingent disappear into the vast expanse of the ocean, laden with an undisclosed consignment. Could that valuable hoard have consisted of the very sacred artifacts or ancient manuscripts utilized in these arcane rites? We also glimpsed industrious bees hovering above the intricate stonework of Rosslyn, their collective hum seemingly integrated into the very fabric of the edifice. Might these vibrant, humming sentinels represent an auditory reverberation of the clandestine rituals murmured in these subterranean depths? These enigmatic observances persist as an inherent contradiction, simultaneously denounced and hidden, partially credited and partially repudiated. Whether deemed sacrilege or esoteric enlightenment, they serve as a potent reminder that historical narratives frequently reveal themselves in stratified dimensions, one illuminated for the public scrutiny of monarchs and ecclesiastics, another veiled beneath, accessible only to those who pursued an alternative form of illumination. In those crypts, the enigma condenses like fragrant incense smoke, spiraling upwards, yet never entirely dissipating from its source. As the final embers of Templar influence flickered into oblivion across Europe, speculative narratives commenced their westward trajectory, propelled by the ceaseless currents of the Atlantic air. For if their formidable naval contingent indeed disappeared, as previously recounted in our exploration, then either rational deduction or perhaps a profound yearning implies that it must have ultimately reached an alternative coastline. Some proponents of these theories assert that this destination was neither the rugged shores of Scotland nor some secluded French cove, but rather an immense and unexplored landmass beyond the oceanic expanse, a vast and untamed continent. One incontrovertible historical fact provides a foundational premise for this conjecture. Viking seafarers, under the leadership of Leif Erikson, had successfully navigated to the North American continent several centuries prior to the renowned voyages of Columbus. Their epic narratives vividly recount the existence of Vinland, describing it as a verdant territory abundant with indigenous grapevines and expansive primeval forests. If such resilient Nordic mariners could accomplish such a transoceanic feat, why then could not the Templars, equipped with their robust vessels and driven by clandestine objectives, achieve the same? After all, sophisticated nautical engineering and maritime capabilities did not abruptly dissipate simply when King Philip IV initiated his ruthless persecution. From this established historical precedent, a multitude of speculative hypotheses emerges. One prominent theory suggests that the Templars transported their accumulated riches across the vast oceanic expanse, interring them in what is presently known as Nova Scotia. Oak Island, with its notorious money pit, continues to be the most frequently murmured site associated with this narrative. Unusual lithic formations bearing cruciform engravings, persistent legends of intricate subterranean conduits, and vestiges of ancient timber all serve to sustain a persistent legend that steadfastly resists refutation. An alternative line of inquiry extends towards the southern regions, pointing to enigmatic stone structures dotting the New England landscape or rock carvings that certain proponents maintain depict discernible medieval European iconography. Skeptics, however, dismiss such notions as utterly whimsical, as imaginatively extravagant as asserting that bees pioneered the art of map-making. Yet one might playfully observe, the intricate cellular structure of the honeycomb does indeed bear a striking visual resemblance to an elaborate chart, does it not? Academic disagreements congregate with the intensity of gulls converging upon a laden fishing vessel over the question of Templar presence in the Americas. Some scholars vehemently assert that there is absolutely no verifiable archaeological corroboration for Templars on the continent, systematically categorizing every purported artifact and unsubstantiated report as either mere happenstance or deliberate fabrication. Others, however, referencing the ancestral oral narratives preserved within specific indigenous communities, contend that subtle vestiges could indeed be present, albeit obscured by the relentless march of time, prone to erroneous interpretation and influenced by fervent desire. This ongoing polemic bears a striking similitude to the act of contemplating cloud formations. One faction perceives nothing but amorphous vapor, while the opposing party adamantly asserts the distinct form of a nautical vessel. The perceptual landscape undergoes a profound transformation as the narrative shifts to the vast expanse of ocean waves. One can vividly imagine the deep, resonant groaning of massive wooden spars and the rigging humming a taut, melodic strain in the face of the gale, while the pungent saline taste stings the skin of the lips to the point of chapping. In the far distance, seagulls might be seen circling gracefully above an uncharted coastline, their piercing calls interweaving with the thunderous crash of ocean breakers. The aroma of coniferous trees would drift towards the interior, interspersed with the faint, acrid smell of combustion from concealed hearths. At night, beneath alien stellar configurations, these intrepid knights might have pondered with profound contemplation whether their arduous mission had finally reached its conclusion or had merely embarked upon an entirely new, unforeseen chapter. A subtle vein of mordant wit invariably infiltrates even these grand narratives. As is often the case, a particular 19th century antiquarian asserted with conviction that the Templars, with an unexpected flourish, had etched navigational charts onto the exoskeletons of lobsters caught off the rugged coast of Maine. Another enthusiast adamantly maintained that a specific tower situated in Rhode Island was unequivocally of medieval provenance, though his own professional counterparts discreetly observed its uncanny resemblance to a structure characteristic of colonial windmills. And a more recent skeptic, with a sigh of exasperation, drolly remarked, "If the Templars truly did reach the American continent, they must have interred their valuable hoard with exceptional thoroughness, to such an extent that even the original custodians lost all recollection of its location." The intricate strands of earlier narratives now shimmer with renewed significance. One is prompted to recall the immutable bees of Rosslyn, perpetually sculpted into stone, appearing to gesture towards distant horizons. One remembers the disappeared naval contingent, utterly consumed by the nocturnal oceanic expanse. One recollects the hallowed chalice, conceived not as a mere vessel, but as a venerable ancestral line. Might this profound mystery have also traversed these vast distances, finding itself hidden amidst the dense coniferous woodlands and beneath unfamiliar celestial configurations. Indeed, each preceding reverberation discovers its resonance within this nascent territory, suggesting through subtle murmurs that the ancient enigmas of the old world could have firmly established themselves in the new. Whether factually verifiable or purely imaginative, this compelling concept has profoundly embedded itself within the collective human imagination. The ghostly sails of Templar vessels silently navigating towards an unexplored oceanic boundary, transporting sacred artifacts, ancient manuscripts, or potentially the very essence of a revered lineage. Ultimately, the annals of history offer no definitive assurance, leaving us only with elongated, spectral shadows extending across the vast Atlantic, until they ultimately merge indistinctly with the ephemeral foam upon the surging waves. The tumultuous journey finally culminates in a profound quietude. The fervent conflagrations of denunciation, once raging fiercely, have at last been extinguished. Maritime vessels, bearing the weight of empire and ambition, have receded entirely from view, disappearing beyond the furthest reaches of the observable world, and the hushed pronouncements of formidable monarchs and venerable pontiffs have long since dissolved into the annals of history. Nevertheless, the profound inquiries continue to endure, shimmering with a delicate luminescence. Much like a swarm of diligent bees hovering persistently in the fading glow of dusk, perpetually in motion, perpetually unresolved. A solitary and unassailable historical datum firmly establishes this narrative's concluding point. The meticulously preserved official documents pertaining to the Templar Order's dissolution present an exceedingly sudden and unequivocal termination. Their venerable Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, met his tragic demise at the fiery stake in the year 1314, his final utterances resonating with a potent anathema directed against both the reigning monarch and the supreme pontiff. Remarkably, both of these powerful figures swiftly succumbed to their own mortality, following him to the tomb within a short span. A segment of scholarly opinion attributes this sequence of events to mere happenstance. Conversely, a more enigmatic contingent of chroniclers quietly posits that the mechanisms of retribution occasionally manifest in exceptionally peculiar forms. This particular incident stands as one of those intractable occurrences that the grand tapestry of history finds utterly impossible to render palatable or neatly categorized, irrespective of the voluminous quantities of archived vellum that might be amassed in an attempt to obscure its stark reality. Unsubstantiated theories continue to permeate the intellectual atmosphere, much like the delicate, pervasive aroma of liturgical incense. A compelling question arises. What if the dramatic execution of de Molay did not signify a definitive cessation, but rather served as the solemn ratification of an enduring pact? What if the venerable Templar order, instead of simply vanishing, merely transmuted itself, receding into an enigmatic obscurity, subtly integrating its clandestine structures into the burgeoning movements of Freemasonry, or into the esoteric doctrines of Rosicrucianism, and perhaps even into the concealed grasp of unseen operatives who, even now, surreptitiously manipulate the intricate levers of global influence. A segment of academic authorities readily dismisses such notions as mere fanciful conjecture, emphasizing that no unambiguous genealogical connection has ever been substantiated. Nevertheless, a more intrepid cadre of researchers adamantly contends that the circumstantial evidence presents a configuration that is altogether too precise, too remarkably synchronized, to be casually overlooked. The contentious arguments reverberate with a resonant intensity, akin to the sonorous pealing of majestic cathedral bells across a vast landscape. Was the fabled Holy Grail truly a sacred vessel, a mystical stone, an arcane manuscript, or perhaps even a profound genealogical lineage? Did the enigmatic figure of Mary Magdalene indeed traverse the perilous oceans, as ancient murmurs suggest? Or does she perpetually endure as a character eternally subject to historical disputation and reinterpretation? Was the legendary Templar treasure simply a material accumulation of wealth, or did it possess a spiritual significance that transcended all earthly valuation? Each individual historian invariably possesses a distinct perspective on these matters, and yet, every single one of these carefully constructed opinions invariably contains critical vulnerabilities, chinks in their logical armor capacious enough to permit a fully armored knight's warhorse to gallop unimpeded through their theoretical foundations. The immersive sensory narrative now gently recedes, transitioning into a more ethereal and evocative register. Envision a sacred chapel, abandoned for an incalculable span, its interior permeated by a profound coolness, its ancient flagstone floor strewn with the remnants of beeswax stubs, consumed and extinguished countless centuries past. A subtle aroma of pulverized stone dust persists in the quietude, delicately infused with the spectral essence of long-departed frankincense. The moon's luminous glow, a silvery cascade, filters through a lofty, arched window, meticulously etching ephemeral, chalice-like formations of light upon the time-worn paving stones. Beyond the venerable structure, the ceaseless wind murmurs softly as it sweeps across fields of verdant grass, which, in epochs long forgotten, absorbed the sorrowful libations of both human blood and collective tears. A profound sense of irony now casts its ultimate knowing grin upon this saga. The ecclesiastical authorities, in their fervent endeavor to utterly obliterate the Templars' narrative from the annals of remembrance, inadvertently bestowed upon it an unparalleled and eternal life. The fabled treasure, which may very well have never manifested in any tangible form, has paradoxically evolved into one of the most persistently cherished and captivating artifacts within the boundless realm of human fantasy. And somewhere, perhaps, a long-deceased medieval scrivener undoubtedly finds amusement in his sepulchre, cognizant that his simple transcriptional error, a mere misrendering of the word cupboard, became the unwitting catalyst for centuries of intricate and widespread conspiratorial hypotheses. The myriad thematic allusions now coalesce, resonating harmoniously like the intricate chords of a complex musical composition. The mysterious buzzing of bees within ancient stonework, the conceptualization of the chalice not as a vessel, but as a sacred lineage, maritime expeditions engulfed by swirling mists, the enigmatic crypt beneath Rosslyn Chapel, the labyrinthine caverns of Scotland, and the far-flung, enigmatic coastlines of the Americas. Each of these evocative echoes invariably converges upon the same profound and disquieting void, the palpable stillness that descended in the wake of the Templars' catastrophic downfall. And thus, the intricate narrative draws to its conclusion, not with the definitive clarity of absolute certainty, but rather with a persistent and evocative query. If the legendary Grail was never intended to be a physical artifact, but rather an esoteric truth, then perhaps its destiny was never to be discovered in a material sense, but merely to be intuitively apprehended. Perhaps its authentic sanctuary is not situated beneath the hallowed stones of Rosslyn, nor within the enigmatic depths of Oak Island, nor indeed beneath the bustling thoroughfares of Parisian streets. Instead, its true abode may reside within the profound quietude that inevitably ensues when humanity demands an excessive degree of elucidation from history, and in recompense is met with naught but an impenetrable silence. At this juncture, the intricate narrative deliberately decelerates, its rhythm becoming more measured, its cadence akin to a breath gently exhaling, while its descriptive passages extend gracefully, much like the elongated shadows of an encroaching twilight stretching languidly across an expansive meadow. The tempestuous maritime voyages, the grim, torch-illuminated confines of ancient dungeons, the clandestine repositories concealed deep beneath the hallowed foundations of venerable cathedrals. All these vivid tableaux commence their gradual recession, diminishing into mere ephemeral undulations upon the placid expanse of slumber. Envision a flickering candle, its diminutive flame now guttering precariously, bending with a tender inclination as if offering a final, silent valediction. Conceive of ancient parchments being meticulously coiled, secured with crimson silk ribbons, and carefully restored to their designated alcoves upon dusty shelves, where they shall remain in the solitary companionship of accumulated particulate matter for untold epochs. Picture, too, the industrious bees, finally retreating into the secure sanctuary of their hive, their collective murmur gradually subsiding into a gentle, soporific drone, a rhythmic pulse of countless wings, before ultimately dissolving into a profound and encompassing silence. The spectral presence of the Knights Templar manifests solely at our conscious invocation. It is when we permit the ancient stone, the whispering currents of air, and the pervasive tendrils of hearsay to articulate their silent narratives that these enigmatic figures momentarily emerge, and when they inevitably recede once more, as they have always done throughout history, they invariably bequeath unto us a greater profusion of unresolved inquiries than definitive resolutions. These are interrogations that are simultaneously disquieting in their ambiguity and curiously reassuring in their persistence, serving as profound mementos that the very essence of enigma might constitute the ultimate enduring treasure. The intricate saga of the sacred lineage, the mystical vessel, the voyaging ships, and the profound secrets now gracefully recedes into a profound tranquility. The authoritative pronouncements of pontiffs, the imperial decrees of monarchs, and the valiant declarations of knights all dissipate into the ether. What endures is the encompassing embrace of night itself, a profound and velvety darkness, gently guiding humanity towards a state of restorative repose. And thus, as the grand narrative of history gently folds itself into the ephemeral realm of dreams, a singular, ultimate question lingers, soft in its articulation and almost whimsical in its implication. If the fabled Grail continues to exist within the fabric of reality, is it patiently awaiting our eventual discovery? Or, in a more profound and subtle sense, has it already, perhaps, found us?